Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today. We are live on virtually all social media. That's YouTube, Twitter, D-Lived, YouTube, and of course our Discord. And we are always happy to be here with you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is a live discussion with you. We want to hear your voice on the issues that matter to you. We're going to be covering a lot of ground. Obviously, we'll be talking about Canada. We'll be talking about what's happening in Russia and the Ukraine. We're also going to be talking about what's happening in other parts of the world that will directly affect the national security of the United States and impact the rest of the world. Something that the rest of the news media doesn't really want to talk to you about, as well as several issues happening in America itself that I think you may not know about and definitely is something that you should know about. So we hope that you're going to enjoy this. We look forward to hearing your comments. You can reach us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all the social media. Send in a chat, a tweet, or you can call into the program at 607-242-1582. Our phone line is on and ready for you. We're looking forward to it. Okay, with all the preamble done, let's get right into it, because one of the big things that I think you need to be aware of, literally one day short of a year ago, it was February 21st of 2021, we were talking to you about the next pandemic that will be occurring. You may not remember this, which is why we wanted to bring it up. We were telling you that it was on February 21st of 2021 that the first confirmed case of the H5N8 bird flu was confirmed to be transferred from a bird to a human being in Russia. And we told you, as things were, we could see the future, we were saying that the pandemic was going to wind down, and then to maintain the fear, since everyone had already moved past the fear, since 97% of everybody who had been affected by the pandemic survived, what shocking news there, that they needed something else to have fear. They needed something else for the 2022 midterm elections. Well, as it turns out, we weren't really wrong, because as we can see now, coming out of, and this is being reported by the BBC News, on February 20th, today, the bird flu. Russia detects first case of bird flu. This is again a reiteration of the BBC News. Here it is. And this is coming out of NBC in New York. The dangerous bird flu found in a flock on Long Island home, prompting major response. February 19th, yesterday, this was being reported. Most people were not paying attention to it. The thing is that the bird flu has been around, and we see that it's affecting commercial flocks in Indiana and Kentucky and in Virginia. It's been at least 9 states. Now, as far as we know, this is not the H5N1. We don't know which variant it is, but it could be the same Russian bird flu that we were telling you about a year ago. And so you should be prepared and aware that it is very likely that with this outbreak now being in 4 states, we see this now affecting New York State, it's gaining more tension. And as we see one pandemic die down, we're seeing the start of another. And we've heard about the bird flu before. So take it with a grain of salt. Be prepared to see that affect a lot of things, because if we are correct, if this becomes more of an issue, the bird flu, this is going to affect poultry prices. This is going to affect food prices. This is going to help to accelerate the inflation rate. So we've already seen inflation up about 22.3% on average for the average American across the country. We're seeing international inflation all across the globe. And we believe this will help to continue this, to move it ahead. And we believe that you're going to see a real world 35%, reported by the government 11% inflation rate by the summer, midsummer, thereabouts. And that's going to be promoted by the fact that we're going to see interest rates increase by at least 2.5%, we believe, by the end of the year. Now, we could be wrong on this, but back in February of last year, we told you that the economy was going to suffer in 2021. We told you that we would see inflation, and we've been seeing everything that we've been calling. I hope to be wrong. I want to be wrong on this, but no one else is telling you about this ahead of time. No one else is telling you to prepare, that food prices have not capped out. This is not the top of the inflation cycle. This is not the top of the unemployment cycle. This is not the top of the devaluing of your money, as the Biden administration continues to spend trillions of dollars destroying the value of your money, helping to move that inflation cycle higher and higher. We want to be wrong, but I don't think we're going to be. But we will see. And of course, we want to hear your voice on this. We want to hear what you have to say about that, no matter what. So I wanted to mention that because I'm pretty sure there isn't another news media agency that's out there that's willing to tell you about this, that's going to even mention it to you. But if we're wrong, please tell us. Let us know that you've heard about this somewhere else. Let me also mention, not only the bird flu is affecting America, and therefore it also affects the world, because it's not just American poultry that's being affected, it's over in Europe as well, and in Russia as well, which means it's probably in China as well, but China likes to hide the things that are affecting its nation and its people. So we won't find out until after everyone else has been affected, because that's the way China rolls. But it is Black History Month in America. In February, that's Black History Month, the shortest month of the year. We have 29 days to talk about Black history. Okay. And I'm one who takes the position more like Morgan Freeman. Stop asking me about my race. Stop telling me or referring to me by my race. I really don't need that. Tell me what you think of me as an individual, as a man, as someone who is a conservative Republican. These are valid points. My skin color has nothing to do with it. It doesn't have any intrinsic value to me as a human being. It doesn't change my life. It doesn't make me smarter or better or worse. It's not like critical race theory and its applications that says that if you're white, you must be evil. If you're black, you must be a victim, and these conditions last your entire life. We reject that idea. But last week on this program, we decided to show you the Boondocks and what happened if Martin Luther King came back today to see what had happened to his dream, to see what has happened since the 1960s in America in race relations, and what we're looking at going forward with all the race baiting and the use of race to manipulate people's votes. Well, it doesn't end there. It gets even worse. As bad as that was, Black History Month, here's part of the story we should be talking about more. Do you know who Quintez Brown is? Quintez Brown is the gentleman who decided that he wanted to try and assassinate a mayoral candidate. Now, this should make people angry, because it made me angry that anyone is trying to assassinate, to try and kill anyone else. And you can use whatever term you want. The left doesn't like assassinate. Okay, attempted murder. Okay, this man, Quintez Brown, who has met with President Obama as part of his efforts with BLM, a man who was put on Joy Reid's program and lauded by the left because of his efforts with BLM and therefore Antifa, we would now believe. No, that man who's also a writer for the Courier Journal that we have up right now. That man who was a student at the University of Louisiana, he has been lauded. People have loved him, and they're defending him because he tried to kill another human being. I want you to understand that. This is the state of race relations in America today, that there is a black man who can walk into a candidate for a political office, walk into his office and try to kill that individual, which otherwise would be known as an attempted mass shooting. It is called gun violence crime. This is an attempted murder. He is a alleged criminal, period, point blank. But because he is black, because he is not just a Democrat, but a progressive, because he is aligned deeply with BLM and Antifa and that political mindset, because he is one of their protected agents, we get letters like this from Ricky L. Jones, a contributor to the Courier Journal, and someone from the University of Louisiana. As I recall, Mr. Quintez Brown, Ricky L., there he is. Dr. Ricky L. Jones is a professor and chair of the Pan-African Studies Department at the University of Louisville. Excuse me, I said Louisiana, it's Louisville. And he is a bi-weekly columnist at the Courier Journal. How far left can you go? Think about this. Dr. Ricky L. Jones, in finding out that one of his co-workers, one of his members of BLM, one of his students, apparently, decided to try and kill another human being, and Dr. Jones, who's teaching our kids, decides, oh my God, this can't be true. This is so terrible. And don't let the media demonize this kid, Quintez Brown. We have to remember, Quintez Brown was an activist. He was a black man. He was part of BLM. He was a student. You can't be upset with him. You can't be upset with attempted murder because Quintez Brown is black. This is the state of race relations in America. This is what we are exporting right now to the United Kingdom and to France very specifically, and also in Canada. This is what we are trying to train the world to believe in. That it's okay for a black man to commit murder, or at least to allegedly attempt to commit murder because of politics, because of someone having a different political point of view than Quintez Brown, a member of BLM. And I want you to see this. I mean, think about what we're talking about here. By the evening, and this is from Ricky L. Jones, by the evening of the incident, local and national news outlets began reporting that there was an assassination attempt in a Louisville mayoral candidate. Quintez was painted as an activist who was involved in Louisville's Breonna Taylor protest. Some mentioned that he interned with the Louisville Courier Journal, this publication. Others didn't. Initially, almost none, save the Courier Journal itself, noted that he was a student at the university. By the way, since the story came out, the the Courier Journal has removed many of the articles by Quintez Brown, the alleged attempted murderer, just to let you know how much they really valued him being on the team. But do you hear what a professor is saying right now? Oh, but we have to talk about this man's background. You can't call him an assassin. What does an assassin do? They try to kill someone, in particular individuals of prominence, like a political candidate. Assassinations of political leaders happen, or attempted to happen, a lot throughout the world. Assassination is an accurate term. He should know that as a professor at a college. But if he wants to use attempted murder, just as good, I don't care if you want to look at him as a Crip or a BLM member, it's the same thing. There is no qualification to this. So he goes on, and it's really, really insulting. He says, they will not talk about the fact that Quintez was among the minority young black boys who to make it to college. They will not talk about the fact that he wasn't just a student, he is gifted beyond description. They never sat with him. They never spoke with him. They never saw him smile or troubled by the suffering of others. Ricky L. Jones, a professor at the University of Louisville, did. And I say to that, who cares? What does that matter? At what point does it matter whether or not Quintez Brown was educated or not? What does it matter whether or not he made friends in BLM and at the University of Louisville or at the Courier-Journal? In fact, I would ask the University of Louisville to consider its education system to try and understand, did they contribute to turning this radical into a violent criminal? Because that's all that matters. You want to tell me, well, he's black. Who cares? Oh, he went to college. I don't care. It doesn't change anything. There is no rule or no law that says, well, you're undereducated. You only have a high school diploma. Therefore, you're a criminal. But if you have a college degree doing the same thing, well, then you're not a criminal. That's insanity. That is stupid on its face. And to see that anyone, especially a professor that is teaching the next generation of Americans, that this individual is willing to stand up and say, oh, please feel sympathy for the attempted murderer. I mean, imagine if this was a white kid who did this. You would hear in every one of the major news media stations, they'd be talking about this attempted mass shooting, another school shooting. They'd be demonizing that kid, not the gun, that kid, not his attempt. They would be demonizing his actions, kind of like they did with Kyle Rittenhouse and so many, many others that we have covered. And yet, for this one young man, most likely because of his political affiliation with BLM, then he's getting a pass. In fact, it wasn't just a pass. They didn't just come out and write articles telling you that you should feel bad and it's okay for him to attempt to kill another human being. No. BLM actually came to the rescue of one of their members and spent $100,000 of money that other American citizens donated. $100,000 out of the $66 million that BLM has received and disappeared. No one knows where that money is, even though its president and founder, Patrice Cullors, went out, bought herself 5 houses. BLM bought a mansion in Canada with money that no one can trace. As she walked away, she's a self-avowed communist and created BLM to promote communism. And yet they're taking $100,000 of the donations that no one has ever stopped. GoFundMe has never stopped them from receiving a dime. Even as we saw Minneapolis, Portland, Seattle, Austin, Boulder, Colorado, New York City, as we saw cities go up in flames and we saw skyrocketing violence because of the riots that BLM created, no one ever stopped them from getting GoFundMe, any donations, and $100,000 of those donations have been used to bail out the attempted murderer, the attempted assassin, Quintez Brown. Quintez Brown. I don't understand it. And they want you to understand that if you are upset about this, if you think it is wrong, for BLM to bail out a attempted murderer, well, then you're a racist. That's what BLM is telling you. That's what Professor Ricky Jones at the University of Louisville is trying to tell you. And I guarantee if he wrote it in a publication, a newspaper, I guarantee you that he is telling his students in the classroom that Quintez is just a good kid. He's misunderstood. And you know what? The evil media are misrepresenting him. He's not a bad guy, even though he tried to commit cold-blooded murder because of politics. Quintez wasn't trying to feed anyone. He wasn't starving on the street. The kid was, and you know what the excuse is nowadays? You know what their excuse is? Well, he was depressed because of the pandemic. Are you kidding me? This is legit. This is legitimately. You think I'm kidding here? BLM Louisville organizer Chanel Helm, who co-founded the Bail Fund, told the outlet, being the New York Post, that Quintez Brown, would be safer out of prison. Don't know why. Safe for who? And claimed that he was likely suffering from PTSD after 2 years of social unrest and the pandemic. Hang on. We're all on the same planet, right? We're all in the same universe, right? The entire globe, every nation in the world, every person in the world for the last 2 years has been affected by the pandemic. And everyone has had to go through various degrees of depression and suffering because of the pandemic. In fact, that's why since February of 2020, we have been promoting the suicide hotline, the domestic abuse hotline, the substance abuse hotline in every single video that we have done since 2020. I believe it was February, end of February, beginning of March of 2020. We have had that up at the beginning of every single show. We have done various episodes on it. That's why 100,000 people have delved into drugs and overdosed in 2021 alone. And this kid is special. And we have to say, well, it's Black History Month and he's a black kid, so he can't commit murder. It's got to be PTSD. Our professors have to teach these other kids that you have to forgive his attempted murder for politics. Let me go to some of the questions and comments here because I'm upset. Anfield mentions GoFundMe is the worst. That's why we stopped. If you notice in our description, we do say you can donate to the program. It helps us out to pay the bills, keep the show on. And we used to have that linked to GoFundMe. We have stopped that. We deleted that. That's canceled. We will not work with GoFundMe. You can, of course, donate Bitcoin if you want, or any of the cryptocurrencies, and use that through our wallet, which you'll see in the description. We agree. GoFundMe is useless. It is political, and just like with Canada, which we will be getting to, they are so political, they are radical. They will take your money, or they will allow governments and other individuals to take your money and to use it for something that they want to be used. That is literally stealing your money, or they will just prevent you from being able to get any funding. Remember, Kyle Rittenhouse couldn't raise a dime. BLM, $100,000 for an attempted murder. Cold-blooded murder, not self-defense, not protecting himself, not trying to feed himself, not a robbery gone wrong. He walked into a room and tried to kill a man because he didn't like his politics. Let me go on. And by the way, Anne, thank you for joining us today. And we always love to hear everyone's comments. And by the way, if you disagree with me, don't take my passion to assume that you can't say, well, Mike, I don't agree. Please, if you don't agree, tell me why. Don't tell me I'm mean. Don't tell me I'm a racist, whatever, some kind of personal insult. Share with me. If you think that Quintez Brown is being railroaded or misrepresented, tell me why you think that's important to understand versus his actions. Please tell me, and tell me why his actions are any different than the actions that have affected everyone, 330 million in the United States alone. Many people who actually have people who died because of the pandemic. Many people who lost their jobs and their businesses because of the pandemic. If you think I'm misunderstanding or misrepresenting, or I'm not being sensitive enough because the kid's black and I happen to be a black Hispanic, which is meaningless in this, then please explain it to me. I will listen to you. I will give you respect because I really want to hear how anyone can be like Professor Ricky Jones of the University of Louisville. And I keep mentioning that university because if your kids are going there, he and perhaps the rest of the faculty are trying to influence your kids. They're trying to brainwash your kids to think that murder based on political belief is justifiable if you have the right color of skin. Let me go back to the comments. Dow mentions that good point about radicalization in college. It would seem to me that shade could be thrown on that professor as being an accessory. The professor admitted sitting and talking with him. What did the professor teach him? Well, the professor is a professor of African history, or it's one of those silly courses that no one except academics use. Here it is. That's right. He is a professor of Pan-African Studies, which is useless in the real world. I mean, unless you happen to be working for an embassy, unless you're a diplomat, or you're an academic, a teacher at a college university, then if you're not one of those things, being a professor or having a degree in Pan-African Studies is useless. It will not get you a job. You might as well be a professor of basket weaving. Jason mentions, and hello, Jason, they just keep treating dark skin color as a disability. It's unbelievable. It is true. And if you listen to Democrats and you listen to what Democrats say about people of color, they infer and they directly state that we are somehow inferior, less than, incapable of being able to survive our lives, and therefore excused for acts of violence as long as you have the right political ideology. If I did the same thing that Quintez Brown did, I guarantee you they wouldn't be trying to bail me out of jail, nor would they be talking about this in newspapers. They'd let me go. They wouldn't care about my college education. They wouldn't care about my travels overseas, my work with homelessness. They wouldn't care about the fact that I do a lot of nonprofit work. They wouldn't care about the fact that I ran for Congress, that I've run for my county legislature. They wouldn't care about my work to improve my community, both very publicly and privately. They wouldn't be talking about that. They'd say, well, he's just an evil Republican. That's what happens when you get brainwashed, and they'd throw me under a bus. They would just say, well, that's just part of the systemic racism because Mike is a victim. He was born a victim. He can't get away from being a victim. That's what they're saying. And that's insulting. And everyone should be insulted by that. Just as we should be insulted by what Professor Ricky Jones has said, that how we should be insulted by what BLM Louisville is doing. Let me continue. Hey, Jesse. DJ Jesse has joined us. Hey, Jesse. It's good to hear you there. And I thank each and every one of you for joining us. And it's just very aggravating to me because this is Black Lives Matter. This is race relations in America right now. And they want to tell you that this is okay. Here's the thing. Where is their article? Where are the people from BLM and the progressive left that are coming out to tell us that the man who stabbed 11 people randomly in attacks in Albuquerque, which happened on Valentine's Day, February 14th, where are their glowing articles telling us that we have to understand his education? Mr. Tobias Gutierrez, an individual by the name that I would have to understand is Hispanic. Where is their glowing, loving help for this man? Are they going to bail out this man? Are they going to tell you about how we can't be upset with him because he's Hispanic, because of the institutional racism, because he is descended from native indigenous peoples of America? Are they going to tell us that you can't demonize this man for trying to kill 11 people? He stabbed 11 people in random attacks. Are they going to excuse that? And you know what the answer is, of course. No, of course they won't. They won't do it at all. Because they don't care. They honestly don't care. They're not coming to Quintez Brown's to save him because he's black, or because there's institutional racism, or because they don't believe in prisons for certain people. They're getting Quintez Brown because he's one of their own, because he did what they would want him to do as a violent activist of BLM and the progressive left. They're going bailing him out because he's a hero for them, much like, what's his name? George Floyd is a hero to them. George Floyd is a martyr. What did Nancy Pelosi say? Thank you, George Floyd, for being a martyr. He wasn't a martyr. He was a drug addict. He was a violent felon, repeat violent felon. He threatened a pregnant woman with a gun. That's George Floyd. He wasn't a martyr. He wasn't looking for anyone's rights. He didn't care. He wanted to steal your money, and he would do it violently so he could have more drugs. Quintez Brown is maybe a step up for that. I'll give you that. He went to college. Yay. He got to talk to President Obama. Yay. He's a little bit better. He was on NBC, which means he must be a good person, right? Except he attempted to kill somebody with a gun. More importantly, he tried to kill somebody who was innocent, which is, to me, absolutely no different than the guy who tried to stab 11 people to death in Albuquerque. They're the same thing. They are violent criminals who need to be taken off our streets to protect the public. Neither one of them deserve to have a bail. $100,000 bail. Are you kidding me? Let me get back to some of the comments here. Dow says, join the Democrats. Our chains will set you free from responsibility, accountability, and adherence to merit. And I agree with you. I agree with you, Dow. I think that that's something that they say repeatedly. That is the message that they're putting out there. Jason from Bing mentions it was an OD. George Floyd, that he had OD'd? Maybe. He was definitely on extreme amounts of fentanyl that would kill average people. That is a fact. It's not a question. More importantly, I don't care. George Floyd was a violent criminal. George Floyd is dead. Did he need to die that way, whether it's from fentanyl or because of lack of oxygen? No, but I'm not going to cry. I have not felt bad a moment in my life that a violent felon, a repeat violent felon, is no longer on the face of the earth trying to intimidate and to victimize fellow citizens, which, by the way, the target of most of the violence from George Floyd, the target of his drug dealing and drug addiction, were the black people. There's your martyr for you. And again, if you think I'm misrepresenting George Floyd, if you think that I am besmirching his wonderful reputation, 607-242-1582. Call on in. Or like you are seeing from Jesse and from Dal and from Ann and from Jason, go ahead and leave a comment and tell me. Don't say you're a racist. Don't dodge. Don't use something cheap. Don't make it a personal attack. If you think that I am besmirching Quintez Brown or George Floyd, then please give me a reason. If you think that being a college student that happens to be black, or being black in America, or some other reason justifies cold-blooded murder, please tell me. I want to hear that justification. If it exists, I want to hear it, because I will apply it in life if it makes sense. Please convince me, because I haven't heard anything that convinces me yet. And you don't need to be a college professor to understand attempted murder is a crime, it is violent, and it is not something we want in our society from anyone. I don't care what their color is. That's meaningless. The very fact that you bring it up is meaningless. It is a deflection. It's all political. And if you think it's not political, please tell me why. I'm always open to hear you. I will give you the time. Call on in. But I want you to understand the context of this, because the news media wants to avoid that. Professor Ricky Jones wants you to miss the context. They don't want you to look at the details. BLM Louisville, like BLM across the entire nation, don't want you to understand the context. And the context is violent crime for politics. Their lesson out of this is, if you don't have the right political ideology, they will punish you. That you can be punished up to and including your life. That they are willing to stand by and justify and allow individuals that they don't agree with to die. That's the context that you need to take away from this, which is why I am so upset about this, why this is so important. It's not because I don't care, you know what, throw out the BLM. They are justifying, and they are trying to make you sympathize and empathize with someone who would kill someone because of political belief. Which means that to give you an understanding, to put this into real world understanding here, there is no difference between what Quintez Brown did because of BLM, because he had a political opinion, and a candidate for an elected office had a different opinion. There's no difference between that and you say that the speed limit should be 65 on the highways and not 55 on the highways. If someone has a different opinion than you, then you, according to the ideology coming from BLM and the University of Louisville, should be allowed to kill someone for saying that the speed limit should be 55 and not 65. It is the same concept. And if you think that is insane, ridiculous, and unjustifiable, then the same thing applies to Quintez Brown. We cannot have two tiers of justice. We can't have multi-tiers of justice based on what's your color of skin, what's your sexual preference, what gender are you? Are you in the middle of transitioning or not? What's your political preference? We can't, justice is not tiered, which is why they call it social justice, because it's not justice. If you have to have an adjective before the word, it is not that word. Social justice is not justice. It is a political tool. That's it. And again, if you disagree with me, I'm always open to hear your words. Jason mentions if they can keep you quiet over this because of fear, they prove they can control you. Yes, that's why they don't want other people to speak about this. And I know what they're going to turn this into. They're going to turn this into, it's about guns. Well, it's because of, they're going to, instead of, in every other case, the problem is the person who shot. It's always the person is the problem, unless they happen to be black, unless they happen to be a confirmed progressive, then the problem becomes the gun. The gun is the problem. We have to take away the firearm because the wrong political preference was there. Alec Baldwin, who should be arrested already, who should already be in jail. And if I were in the same situation as Alec Baldwin, I'd already be in jail. But Alec Baldwin is another example of a BLM progressive leader with recognition in Hollywood that is allowed to flaunt the laws and rules that you and I have to live by because he has the correct point of view. And they blame the gun. We've been hearing, they've been blaming the gun. They've been blaming everyone on the set. They're blaming everyone in the universe. I've even seen articles where they have blamed the woman who got killed by Alec Baldwin. And yes, Alec Baldwin admitted that his finger was on that trigger, that he cocked that gun. Alec Baldwin is responsible. Therefore, Alec Baldwin, by his own admission, is a murderer. And he's forgiven and he's treated with an entire different set of gloves because Alec Baldwin wasn't treated like what happened here. SUNY Potsdam, State University of New York in Potsdam. A young woman, 21 years old, Elizabeth Howell, 21, died this Friday because a random man walked up and shot her. And what you're going to hear from the rest of the media is, well, that's the gun, it's the guy. If he's black, it's definitely the gun is the problem. If he's not black, and in this case, by the way, he's not black, he's white. So the problem is, he's a crazy white man. He's a crazy white man, and therefore he's the problem and the gun. But if he was black, it would just be the gun is the problem. But he's not being treated like Alec Baldwin, who also killed a young woman, a mother, no less. You're not seeing the same thing. Quintez Brown is not being treated like Michael J. Snow. Do you see the difference there? And maybe you think I'm wrong. Maybe you think I'm misunderstanding it. But I'm giving you clear examples to compare this with. Quintez Brown with the BLM and how he's being treated. Look at Alec Baldwin, who is admitted to being responsible for firing the firearm, which in my book means murder. And then there's this guy, Michael Snow, who killed a young woman and Michael Snow, who killed this woman in Potsdam. And I see there's absolutely no difference between any of them and this crazy man, Hispanic, apparently, in Albuquerque, who tried to stab 11 people to death. But let me ask you, which one of these stories are you hearing about? Which one have you heard about? You heard about Quintez Brown, right? You heard that Quintez Brown, not that bad a kid. He's a college student. He's a good guy. Everyone loved him. He was such a great people person. He did such great work for BLM. This is a good man. Oh, by the way, he attempted to murder someone because of politics. This is your Black History moment. This is Black History Month 2022 in America. This is your Black History moment. By the way, talking about guns, talking about firearms and the Second Amendment in America, here's another stupid idea that's coming straight from California. I know you're shocked. And in California, under Governor Newsom, They are trying to make it possible for individuals to sue gun manufacturers because someone else committed a crime. I want to be very clear here. So, as in the case, if you happen to be, say, someone in the office of the candidate in Louisville, when we saw Quintez Brown walk into the room, and when Quintez Brown decided to try and cold-bloodedly murder people, if you survived, or your family, if you had not, are the ones who are allowed to then turn around and sue a gun manufacturer that doesn't know your name, doesn't know the name of the shooter, that never had anything to do with that situation whatsoever. And the reason why you can do that is because Texas believes that a baby with a heartbeat shouldn't be aborted. I swear to God, that's it. At a news conference in the coastal town of Del Mar, north of San Diego, Governor Newsom said that he thought the Texas law was wrong, and the Supreme Court's decision in December to let it stay in effect while it's being appealed was absurd and outrageous. So Governor Newsom, a progressive, a Democrat who has a political opinion, wants to punish Texas for Texas passing a law, something that states' rights, 10th Amendment, they can do that. Because Texas passed a law in Texas that affects Texas, the governor of California wants to punish other conservatives and Republicans in his state, and he's using his logic to say, well, the Texas law, approved last year, bans all abortions once a fetal heartbeat is detected, usually around the 6th week of pregnancy. The law does not let the government enforce it. Instead, private citizens can sue abortion providers or anyone who aids and abets the procedure. Now, the bill in California would do the same thing. But instead of abortion providers, it would let people sue gun makers who sell, make, or distribute, quote, assault style, which doesn't exist, guns in their state. Again, I've debunked this many, many times. The assault weapon, assault rifle term was created in California in 1989. It doesn't exist. There is no such thing. The closest thing, if you're talking about an actual assault rifle, that will be a machine gun, and that's in the military. We have laws about that. By the way, 700,000 machine guns are owned by American citizens, 113 American citizens at this moment. So yes, you have a right to own a machine gun. You have a right to own a tank if you want to. And that has nothing to do with anything. So those are assault style weapons. And by the way, you have never seen a crime committed with a tank in America. And there's been 3 times in American history where someone has used a machine gun to commit a crime. So that's not really a problem. But what they're saying is that because in Texas, the people of Texas wrote a law, passed a law that said if a baby has a heartbeat, you cannot kill that baby. Therefore, in California, they're saying, well, if someone dies because of a gun, you can sue the gun manufacturer. There is no correlation here. They're not the same thing. But maybe you think I'm wrong. Maybe you think I don't understand it. So let's find out. Dow says, by the logic of using an adjective before the word, going back to me talking about social justice, which is not justice, it's something completely different. It's a political tool. It's not justice. Dow goes on to say that the logic of using an adjective before the word, you could say the same about self-described ex-Americans. As in, and he goes on to say, Why do you have to be an Irish American, African American, Polish American? Why not just be an American? If you want to be acknowledged by an ethnic heritage, it can be demonstrated without labels. Well, I'm not an African American. You might be able to say I'm a Black American if you want to be called a white American or a tan American or a red American or whatever color of American, which I don't really feel good about. Am I Black Hispanic? Absolutely. Am I American? Absolutely. The two have nothing to do with each other. I'm an American because I was born in America, which is a wonderful thing. And I love America. That's why I joined the Marines. That has nothing to do with my color of skin. Being a Marine isn't based on the color of your skin. Being an American is not based on the color of your skin. It doesn't have anything to do with your nationality, where you came from, where your ancestors were, how your ancestors got here. Got nothing to do with any of that. So yeah, I wouldn't use that. Now, the difference though, Dal, and I do want to say this is, but labeling yourself as a Palestinian American, as an example, you're not invalidating the American in the same way that social justice invalidates justice. Because social is being added on, that invalidates it. I would not say the same thing about being an Irish American, a Palestinian American, a Russian American. No. But it does lessen, and I will say it does lessen the fact that you're putting something else before being an American. You are valuing being an American less than being something else. And if you have that much of an appreciation for something else besides being an American and only being an American, go back to Palestine, go to Ireland, go to Italy, go to wherever that nation is. You want to go back to China? You want to be Chinese American? Go to China. Be Chinese. But if you want to be an American, just be an American. Why we don't say this and why this is considered racist or bad, I don't know. You don't have to like it. You may want to be very proud of your heritage. I'm happy for you. Be as proud of your heritage as you want to be. Go out, start a parade, invite people to come and celebrate your heritage and your history and your lineage. Knock it out the park. I'm happy for you to do that. Do it all day long. Go and get a license. Go and make a march. Go out, stand on a soapbox, and scream at the top of your lungs in the middle of a park about what a wonderful heritage you have. I'm all happy for you. But you're an American first and foremost, and that is separate of your heritage, your lineage, and whatever historical, any history your lineage may have separate of America. And I don't care. And I don't have to care. You're an American, and then you're something else after that. Thank you. Dal thinks it was well said. I like to believe it that way, but, you know, and people will disagree. And people will tell me, Mike, you can't say that. That's racist. You have to acknowledge being African. I'm not African. Point blank, I'm not African. My family hasn't been in Africa. And by the way, yes, one side of my family did decide to track back our history. And we made it to 1862. And then all records ended. So as far as I know, at least from 1862 and beyond, my family has nothing to do with Africa. That's well over 200 years. Correction, over 150 years. Okay. You know what? I got nothing to do with Africa. That's what, 7 generations? I got nothing to do with Africa. I'm not African. Period. But you're African American. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. And would you discount the fact that I'm also Hispanic? I'm Puerto Rican. I've got family that goes back to Spain. I got family that goes back to the Taino Indians, which are the native Indians of Puerto Rico. Does that not count? Is that now invalidated because the popular thing to say right now is African American? You have to be African American. Isn't that popular? Isn't that great? It's on TV. I heard someone on the news say it. Come on, folks. We're better than this. At least we should be better than this. So yes, I'm upset about the fact that they are trying to conflate abortion with the Second Amendment. Just because a political figure thinks that it should be to teach a lesson to people who do not agree with his political point of view. By the way, do you notice how we are seeing over and over again? These are all stories about how people who have created problems, progressives, Democrats, weak politicians, these people with political agendas, and they're trying to save you from the problems that they created. They created the racial tensions in America over the last, since 1980. In the last 40 years, Democrats have actively been pushing racial tensions for their political agenda because they want to save people. Institutional racism, we have to save you, whether you happen to be white or whether you happen to be black or you happen to be Hispanic. They're trying to save you from institutional racism by making you a racist, by teaching you critical race theory so that you can now accept that if you're white, you're evil, and if you're black or Hispanic or a person of color, that you're a victim inherently by birth and you can do nothing about it. I reject that. I think everyone should reject that. They're trying to save, in California, they're trying to save Americans by trying to bankrupt the Americans that work at gun manufacturing companies, gun sellers, and wholesalers, retailers, people who make bullets. They want to punish them because they're the wrong point of view. Because Democrats defunded the police and increased racial tensions and are telling people of the right political ideology that you can commit any crime and you will be bailed out of jail, you will be protected, you will be elevated into martyrdom because of your politics. And that creates more crime. That creates worse crime. That creates hate crimes, as the left would like to tell us exists. They're creating hate crimes for their political gain. They're trying to save you from institutional racism by creating a pool of racism around you. They're trying to save, Texas is trying to save babies, and they're trying to fight that. Remember, abortion is people who are fighting to kill a baby with a heartbeat. This is what Governor Newsom's upset about. Come on, let's put it in actual context and have the conversation that no one in the news media will dare to have with you because they are terrified you might be upset. Yes, you may be upset with me. You may not agree with me. You may tell me that and write it down and call in, and that's fine. Because you have that right to have an opinion. I also have a right to an opinion. We don't have to agree. But I can tell you that Governor Newsom has a political opinion that says that it is okay to kill a baby with a heartbeat, because that's what the abortion bill is trying to prevent. That is what he is fighting against. He is fighting for the right to kill a baby with a heartbeat. That is what he is fighting for. That is what the abortion argument is. You don't have to like it. You don't have to feel good about it. You don't have to say, well, Mike, you could word it better. I don't have to word it better. That is what it is. And to save you from the problem of being pregnant, then Governor Newsom wants to kill the baby. You don't have to like that. You don't have to say, well, Mike, I don't see it that way. You don't have to. I do. But Governor Newsom wants to punish me. And here's the thing. He wants to punish me so that I will understand that he is saving people from being pregnant. He is saving them. And I am the bad guy, according to Governor Newsom, for defending the baby with a heartbeat. And so is everyone else in Texas. And so he is going to punish people in California where that law does not apply because he doesn't like it. How often are we seeing that? That we're seeing progressives punish people for the crime of not agreeing with them, whether or not they happen to be in their region. How often do you see that? Because guess what? You see it a whole lot. And when I say that they're trying to save their own people and punish everyone else, that they committed and created these problems that they're now trying to save you from, here we go. ABC News. Do you notice I keep finding these stories on the left? Not that you're being told about them, not that they're being promoted in the news media, not that they're having this out on your nightly news, spending a minute and a half to 30 seconds to a minute and a half to tell you what's happening here. You're not hearing about this. This is regional, and they don't want you to notice it, and it's been buried. But on February 16th, 4 days ago, a man in Chicago, a man who happens to be this black man, this guy. This man, I believe it's that man. I may have gotten, and I apologize if I've gotten the wrong image. Black man. He decided to go out. James Massey, he pled guilty in federal court on Tuesday because he was going out and he was promoting riots. He was getting people to incited and he was getting them riled up and he was helping them to riot, which violates the First Amendment. I am a near absolutist. The only thing that you can do that violates the First Amendment is to incite violence. By your actions, by your words, to cause people to become violent and to take violent action without cause. That is a crime. That is not covered by the First Amendment. Everyone agrees with that. And this man did exactly that. Using his words, as he has admitted, he went out and told people, go and riot in Chicago. Burn down parts of Chicago, destroy businesses in Chicago, leave people unemployed in Chicago, destroy their homes in Chicago because BLM. Bring your tools, ski masks, and gloves, Mr. Massey said to the public in one of many of his messages, trying to get people to riot and loot. And possibly he may be responsible for some of the people who died as a result of the environment he created to get people to go out and commit acts of violence and to break the law. Two people were shot and more than a dozen officers were injured in the rioting that ended with more than 100 arrests. Mind you, they started off with thousands of arrests. There's only 100 that are left because progressives in Chicago have absolved the people, just let them out, opened up the doors and let them walk away. That is a fact. Mayor Lightfoot, look it up. I've covered it on this program many, many times. They just opened the doors and let them walk away. But we know 2 people were shot. Isn't that attempted murder? Shouldn't this man, Mr. James Massey, shouldn't he be guilty of those attempted murders because he incited people to commit crimes, to break the law, to commit acts of violence, to commit acts of destruction, which is not covered by the First Amendment? Shouldn't anyone be upset about this? Shouldn't you know this? That this man, and by the way, these were BLM riots. Notice how many things are connected to BLM right now that the news media doesn't want you to think about it. Well, he got people riled up in 2020 in Chicago. What was happening in 2020 in Chicago that there were riots, that 2 people got shot, 100 people got arrested, dozens of police officers were injured. What was happening? BLM riots. ABC News is trying to hide this from you. They're trying to downplay this. They don't want you to think about this because it's BLM. It's BLM. You can't be upset about that. Does that sound like Quintez Brown to you? Does that sound like the activist Quintez Brown, who wrote for the Courier Journal that it was a student at the University of Louisville that has Professor Ricky Jones defending him? How is that any different than what we are seeing right now with ABC News telling you, but it's okay. He was rioting during BLM. It's not that big a deal. We don't even need to mention BLM. You don't even need to connect his rioting with BLM riots because they were mostly peaceful. Move on. Don't think about it. Look, folks, you can tell me, Mike, you just don't understand. You've got it wrong. You're misunderstanding the information. You're using bad sources. By the way, the sources I'm using are coming from the left. You notice I keep using left-leaning sources. I'm going to NPR. I'm going to ABC. I'm going to NBC. I'm going to, who else have I used so far? What was that other one I used? BBC. I'm using the left-leaning sources. And over again, they are using their politics to punish you. And then they put out in the news media, they put in every single story, in every single article, they're telling you, we saved you from the problem we created. They created the BLM riots. They created the race riots of 2020 and 2021. They created that environment, and now they're trying to save you from it. And they're going to save you from racism by teaching your kids how to be racist. They're going to save you from gun violence by getting rid of the police and by encouraging people of certain colors, of certain political preferences, to be able to commit more violence. But they're going to save you. And if you think I'm wrong, if you think I misunderstand this, I am asking, I am begging, I am pleading, call in 607-242-1582. Tell me how I've misunderstood the facts that exist. Tell me how I am misunderstanding what is being reported as I am showing it to you right now. Tell me how I am misunderstanding the conclusions I am coming to from the evidence that is being presented to you. Don't just tell me I'm a racist. Don't tell me that, well, you're part of the fringe, Mike. No one pays attention to you. That's not true. That's never been true. If you're a Republican, you're about 30% of America. If you're conservative, you're about 30% of America. And if you happen to be someone who believes, and at least half the nation believes in protecting babies from abortion, I'm not nearly isolated or alone. Oh, but you're black. Black people are Democrats. That is racist. To say that my skin color determines my political options, that I don't have that choice, that I am somehow abandoning or giving up my birthright of the color of my skin, like I can turn it on and off, that is racist. To say that I have to be black or progressive or BLM is to say you are a racist and see the world in racist tones, because that's the only way you can explain that. Because there should be no reason to say, well, I have a conservative Republican point of view. Let me explain why. Let me give you the details of why I understand these things. And if you can say, well, that's just racist. If you say, well, you can't do that because of the color of my skin, then you're a racist. That is the racism. That is denying people opportunity because of the color of their skin. That's racism. That's prejudice. By definition. I don't know. Maybe people disagree with me. I don't know, folks. You tell me if you disagree with anything that I've been talking about. Are politicians trying to save us? Are the news media trying to save us as they are destroying our society, as they're trying to destroy our nation? Am I misunderstanding the facts? Am I misunderstanding the news? Is the evidence I am showing you over and over again, is that somehow not real because it came from ABC or it came from NBC or NPR or the BBC? Does that somehow mean that it's entirely different than what I've reported? Because the color of our skin changes? Well, your color of skin may change. I'm black already. I'm black Hispanic. I have two of the ethnic groups that they want to tell me have to be protected, and yet they demonize me. And I can show you a video of them doing it to me. Young white progressives attacking me, racial slurs, threatening and intimidating me on news, on the media. I can prove it. But that's okay because my politics is wrong. That is prejudice. And if you don't agree, I really, really, really beg you, call in and tell me why I misunderstand it. But I should add in, there have been several members. In 2020, I had a Back to Blue event that I had put together, and I was also running for an elected office at the time. And I had several people, well, actually about 50 people, of BLM and the Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, which is BLM and Antifa. They're all the same thing. And is that a generalization? Sort of, except consistently, as we look through the news stories, I don't know how you see the difference, because Quintez Brown is BLM doing things that Antifa does. I don't see the difference. Anyway, they came up and they tried to intimidate me. They tried to attack me. And you know what's the funny thing? 2 years later, several of these individuals who walked up to me, who used racial slurs against me, who told me I was an evil demon because I was Republican, you know what they've done in person? They've apologized. They won't do it publicly. They attacked me publicly. They attacked me and they made sure they had YouTube videos, and they made sure they were on my YouTube video, and they made sure the news media got to see it as they attacked me and demonized me and called me every racial slur you could possibly think of. But when they wanted to apologize, after they calmed themselves down, took a step back and actually listened to what I had to say, then they come privately and they go, oh, I apologize. There's the difference. Dow mentions it's only dangerous to be a critical thinker when it interferes with those who, quote, know better. Oh, I love it when they like to say, what you just don't understand. I spend 6, 8 hours, 12 hours a day for 15 years reading every news source in the world to be able to have these conversations with you, to be able to make these videos. Yeah, I do know better than most politicians in America know. And yet they say, oh, but that doesn't count. That doesn't count. Okay, that doesn't count. I don't understand these people. By the way, folks, in the last hour, if you have heard anything that you found to be of interest, that was informative, if you learned something new or heard something that you hadn't considered before, or maybe you did and you enjoy the way that we're presenting it, please consider to like, share, and most of all, subscribe. It helps us to be able to reach more and more people, to be able to hear more and more people's voices. And as I always say, We are always open to hear different voices, to hear people who disagree with us, to hear people who have different points of view, or even the same ones. We want to hear you. Yes, I am passionate about the views that I have. You may be passionate about the views you have. I'm not trying to turn you into me. I am not a progressive. You are not required to believe everything that I believe. That's not America. That's not freedom. So you're happy to hear it, but that's what our channel is here for. And we hope that as we get more and more people to subscribe, we will be able to reach more people and to hear more voices, to hear people who disagree, to find out why they disagree, and to understand better. Because the more people who are involved in our government, in our politics, in our communities, the better we can be. But the more that we have people who are shutting us down, separating us, telling us we can't talk to each other, we can't eat in the same restaurant, we can't work in the same jobs, we can't date people unless they have the exact same political ideology that we have. Well, that's a problem. And by the way, that harkens back, I remember the 1970s, where I heard people use that same kind of language. I remember when I was a very young man in the 1970s in elementary school, when I had the older brother of one of my classmates, and he walked up to me and said that I couldn't be in the same class as his sister, that I couldn't speak to his sister who sat at the desk next to mine because of the color of skin. How is that any different than today? We hear progressives of whatever color say, well, we can't talk to you because you're a Republican, because you're a conservative. And they demonize you because, well, oh my God, you're a conservative Republican of color. Well, that just makes you the devil himself, don't it? Tell me how that is different than what I had as an experience in the 1970s. Not experiences that I had in the 1990s, not in the 2000s. Now, they've gone that far backwards. We've gone over 50 years backwards in time. It's really sad, folks. But I'm talking about a lot of things here today. And you're always welcome to call in, to type in, to reach us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Discord, wherever, and to let us know whether you agree or not. It's up to you. It's your right. I want to hear your voices. And I have no idea how many people I'm reaching because YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, the internet overlords will not let me see the real numbers. They won't tell me how many people are actually watching this. They are terrified for us to be able to speak and to have a conversation. They want you to think that you are alone. And I guarantee you, you are not. I go out and I speak with the politicians on a regular basis. I go out to live events and I cover them on a regular basis. I see the comments on the program. You're not alone. Not even close. But I want to talk about how they are trying to save us. Because, and I am coming to Canada, I do want to talk about Canada. And I want to get into what's happening with Russia because these things are going to affect your lives. But I definitely want to address that part for Black History Month. There's my Black History Month second video on Black History. There you go. But I also want to talk about something that you're going to see coming up that we've been talking about for 4 months now. The last 4 months, actually since Afghanistan, when Joe Biden gave up and abandoned 4,000, possibly 9,000 American citizens in Afghanistan, as has been admitted by documents from the United States Senate, their Foreign Affairs Committee, as the Biden administration has bounced up and down, lying to America, telling us, well, there's 6 people who are left in Afghanistan. There are 100 people, there's 400 people. Their numbers change on a regular basis. Since August of 2021, we've been telling you, watch out. Iran. Joe Biden is desperate, and he has become more and more desperate to get a political win. He needs a win to try and justify why people should go out and vote Democrat in 2022 for the midterm elections. That he needs a reason to justify why he wants to run for president in 2024 along with Kamala Harris. And realistically, Kamala Harris is looking for a reason to justify it because she's going to replace Joe, we believe, in January of 2023. Joe is trying to justify why he's still president at this moment. He's desperate for a win. And that's why he's talking and has been talking to Iran since January of 2020. Since the moment he got into office, he has been begging them, pleading with them to talk with him to make the Iran nuclear deal so that he can have a win, so he can look good politically. The question you should be asking about that, and that we've been talking about, and I'm going to get to your comment in 1 second, Dow, is that he wants to go and give Iran tons of money to commit terrorism so that he can have a political win in America. I'm going to prove that to you in 1 second. I will prove that to you in 1 second. Dow mentioned that he had a discussion earlier about the practice of gatekeeping. It was interesting because people have shied away from the use of discernment to discriminate between good ideas and bad ideas. Well, the problem is, Dow, we are being told by the news media, by Hollywood, by entertainers in the NBA like LeBron James, we're being told by the newspapers, don't think, obey. They told you it's wrong. They told you you can't do things, that you can't say things, you can't believe things. They're telling you what you can and cannot feel and what you can and cannot do. And you're supposed to obey. You're not supposed to think. You're not supposed to question. You're just supposed to obey, which violates everything about America. And I refuse to do that. Dow goes on to say, instead, it has been tied to identity politics, and using discernment has become an ist-charged practice. There you go. Justin the Alpha has mentioned that World War III is coming. Justin, I disagree. Let me explain. Justin, I'm not attacking you, but I want to tell you why I think that's wrong. World War III is a fear tactic. Realistically, at this moment in the world, may be different in the future. At this moment in the world, America is facing 3 regional wars with major factions, but those factions are not aligned. Russia has nothing to do with China. North Korea has very little to do with China or with Russia. Iran has nothing to do with any of them, except that they all hate America. And that doesn't matter what your political preference is. They hate progressives as much as they hate democratic socialists, as they hate if you're libertarian or conservative or Republican. It doesn't matter to them. They hate America because America exists, because America is powerful, because America is rich, because we have a high quality of living, and we have freedom of religion. Women can drive, gays exist. These are the reasons why they hate America. But that's not enough to connect them. They're not politically connected. This isn't like the axis of evil. It's not Germany, Italy, and Japan. They're not connected that way. So if we are fighting, if what we're looking at is potentially having fighting in in Ukraine, in North Europe, we're looking at the Middle East with Iran. We're looking at North Korea and in Southeast Asia. We're looking at China with Taiwan, also in Asia. Those are 3 simultaneous, and it could become simultaneous actions in the world. It's not World War III, it's 3 regional wars. Not quite the same. So does that make sense? And to say it's World War III escalates that and makes it bigger and more deadly in your mind. When you think of World War III, you think of World War II, you think of that massive destruction. Not when you think of If you think of a regional war, you think of Afghanistan, you're not putting that on the same scale as you put World War II on. That's fear. When you equate them as the same thing, and they are clearly not, that's fear. And when people have you afraid, they can then manipulate you to be able to do things you wouldn't otherwise do. That's why they use the fear. You may not agree, Justin, but do you understand why I'm saying that? Do you understand how I separate that and how politically they are separate issues and they're not on that level of fear? You don't have to agree with me, Justin, and I thank you for typing in and commenting, but I just want you to understand why I'm saying that. Now, Justin mentions that Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran all deal with each other in the shadows. They're publicly making announcements. They've been working on deals. I've covered it for many, many times. Iran is in the middle of negotiations with China, trade deals with China and Russia at the moment, but they don't have political alignment. Justin goes on to mention that all four of these countries will become allies. They all have a common goal and are friends. We need to watch out for them. Yes, we need to watch out for them. I agree with you, Justin. They're not allies. They do not agree. Iran, as an example, which I'm going to be talking about in a moment, doesn't care. Iran wants everyone that does not believe in the same fanatical religious beliefs that they have to die. They want to kill everyone who does not express and live by the same fanatical beliefs that they hold. It doesn't matter where you're from or what you do. They just happen to want to take out America and Israel. Israel, because they're close and they're weaker and they're just an affront to their sensibilities and they're close by. America, because we're the king of the hill. So they don't care, but that's an example. North Korea doesn't really care what Iran or Russia are doing. They have their own thing. That's why they're firing 7 hypersonic missiles since the beginning of this year. They don't care what everyone else is getting. They want what they can get. That's why they're leveraging the hypersonic missiles. It's why they're attacking our allies, Japan, and threatening Japan, I should say, and why they're threatening South Korea, countries that we have agreements with. They don't care what's happening in North Korea, in Iran. They don't care what's happening in the Ukraine. It doesn't benefit them. It doesn't matter. So, and I do see the comment from Mike Bowie. Hey, Mike, good to hear from you. Haven't heard from you in a little while. He mentions the deep state will create a war, any war. Well, they need a war because America almost never ends. When we have a war going on, we tend to re-elect all of our leaders to continue through that war. That's just the history of America. So it's a self-preservation tactic. Jason mentions when Russians invade, this will increase energy costs because of the sanctions put on Russia. No, that's not exactly correct. I understand why you think that's correct, but energy costs will increase. That is true, especially in Europe, where, yes, in Europe, energy costs will go up because of Russia, because they provide the Nord Stream pipelines, giving energy to Germany in particular and Europe overall. But that's not why America's energy prices are going up. That's a different thing. And if we were still net exporting oil and gas to Europe, as we were under the prior president, President Trump, then that wouldn't be the case either. So there's different factors there. But I understand why you're saying that. The reasons why we're having inflation and our energy costs going up, separate though. But Justin, the Alpha, mentions that what if China invades Taiwan, North Korea invades South Korea, and Iran invades Israel, while the US and NATO is in Europe? What will happen? Exactly what I'm describing, and exactly what I've said. We'd have 3 or 4 regional wars, all happening simultaneously. They're not connected, and they are not aligned by the same political or religious ideology. They're not connected. We would have just 4 different regions. And the United States would have to have multifaceted wars going on all at the same time, which I don't believe Biden can handle. He can't even handle one critical event at a time. Look at what happened with Afghanistan. You may disagree, but I think we've seen from experience and what he's been dealing with Russia and his way of dealing with Afghanistan, his ways of dealing with the southern border in the United States. He appeases and he runs away and he hides from things. He has no concept of how to actually negotiate or delegate or deal with this. And Kamala Harris is even worse than Joe Biden, in my opinion. So yes, would those things, and I've said, I believe they may happen, and I do believe they could all happen if one region goes into a war. We could see several of them go off all at the same time. But that won't be a world war. That'll be regional wars across the world. Because the thing that would end China attacking Taiwan, the thing that ends North Korea attacking Japan or South Korea, the thing that ends with Iran in the Middle East attacking Israel, the thing that ends that in each and every one of those cases are entirely separate things. What stops China from attacking Taiwan has nothing to do with North Korea attacking Japan or Iran attacking Israel. Totally different solutions. So again, it's not a world war, but it is conflicts across the world simultaneously, which I don't think a lot of people are prepared for, and I absolutely am sure that the Biden administration is terrified and don't know how to handle. Dow mentions, which is one of the reasons why Iran has not denounced China for their treatment of the Uyghurs, that population is not considered by Iran to even be equated as believers of the same faith. Exactly. So again, they have some similarities, but they don't have the same goals. They don't have the same end expectations. China wants everyone to be communist. Iran wants everyone to be a radical Islamist. North Korea just wants money. Russia wants the land. Very different situations. Justin, I think this is one of the best questions. Justin the Alpha says, wouldn't that be worse and cause more chaos? Yes, absolutely. Having multiple regional wars with major factions like China, Iran, Russia, North Korea is absolutely more chaos, more destructive, and more problematic, which is why we need a strong leader to hold them in, to hold them back, to hold the reins. Whenever, look at the history of the United States, whenever we have had a strong president, rogue nations and nations that are diametrically opposed to the United States and other nations in the world have less activity and are less violent and less radical when we have strong presidents than when we have weak ones. Every single time. In my lifetime, 53 years, almost 54 now, I can't recall a time where we had a weak president and the world wasn't being destabilized and going ballistic. It happened under Obama most recently. It's happening under Biden. Why? They're weak. They don't know what they're doing and they're not prepared. They don't have international policy. I will pose this to everyone that is watching this program right now. What is the international policy of Joe Biden? And I'm going to get into how this affects Canada in just a moment. But I want to make sure we understand this. What is the international policy of the Biden administration? What does he do? Dow says it's just throw resources willy-nilly like someone flailing in a dark room. And I can't say that's wrong because that is kind of what he is doing. But it's about to get worse. For 6 months, 8 months now, we've been telling you that there is a Iran nuclear deal that is being worked on, that Joe Biden is begging for an Iran nuclear deal. And now, as we are hearing, not just from Israel, but from Israel in particular, on February 18th. Get ready for a spectacularly bad Iran deal coming up within the next 2 weeks. Something we have been warning you about, something that we have been telling you about over and over again. Where is it? Quoting an unnamed Israeli security official, Channel 13 News reported that while Israel considered the original deal to have been bad, that's the one under Obama, which funded global terror directly, and I'm quoting then Secretary of State John Kerry, the United States funded global terror. Global terror increased because of the Obama-Iran nuclear deal. That is a fact, not a question. It's not an opinion. It doesn't matter if you like it or not. That's a fact. This is why Israel felt it was a bad deal. Going on, the revived accord taking shape is, quote, spectacularly bad, end quote, as it does not factor in the progress Iran has made. Referring to a leaked draft of the imminent accord, the source said Iran will not be required to destroy its advanced centrifuges. Tehran will have to reduce its enrichment levels, but they already know how to do that, and to produce uranium metal. Here's the other part of this that's also terrifying. And by the way, Al Jazeera, which is not Israel, absolutely the opposite of Israel. I went all the way to the other side of the spectrum just to make sure you understood that I am not framing this one way. It's not political. I'm not trying to just give you part of this story. I want you to understand it all. From Al Jazeera, who hate Israel, they state, the parliamentarians also asserted, these are the people who are working on the Iran nuclear deal. They asserted that all sanctions imposed under false excuses must be lifted, which they defined as nuclear terrorism, missile, and human rights designations, in addition to those under the Iran Sanctions Act, Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, and the U-turn sanctions on dollar transactions. This, according to Al Jazeera, is Iran's parliament. And these are the conditions for the return to the nuclear deal. So in addition to what we are finding out from Israel, which is making it very clear for us that this is a terrible deal and that it is not stopping anything from Iran from being able to have a nuclear weapon, but it is in addition for this deal to go through, for Iran to accept it, what they must do is they're going to say, get rid of all the sanctions. And the last time that we did that we got rid of all the sanctions, global terror increased. The United States paid for global terror because Iran is the world leader in global terror. And they used that money to be able to increase the net global terror in the world to attack America and our allies and Americans overseas around the globe. That's what they did. And they want to do it again. And that's why they want to get rid of, because if this was only about the nuclear deal, why do they need to get rid of the sanctions on Iran? Because they promote global terror. Why do they need to get rid of the human rights designation and the sanctions that are on them because of human rights actions, the crimes that Iran has committed? Why do they need to get rid of those sanctions? It has nothing to do with the nuclear deal. They just want the money so that they can use that money to create more global terror, so that they can spread their version of Islam around the world, radicalizing people so that they can kill everyone who isn't just like them. Think about it. Because I know no one else in the news media is asking you to think about this, to understand how this is going to affect your life. Because if Joe Biden, in fact, is going to, as everyone in the world, all the news media outside the United States, the United States won't even tell you about this. They won't even talk about this. They have you so distracted right now that nobody even knows this is going on. But the fact is that this is going on, and the rest of the world is very aware of this. The rest of the world is paying attention to this. The rest of the world is talking about this, just like we have been talking about it for 6 months or more on this channel, letting you know that Biden is about to give away billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars of your taxpayer dollars and money from around the world. They're going to give it to Iran, and Iran is going to use that to commit global terror, to kill Americans when you're on vacation, going to Europe or traveling around the world, to have terrorists cross the southern border, which is wide open, to try and kill Americans in the United States, like most recently, Boulder, Colorado. How do you think these people travel around these world? How these terrorists get from one nation to another? How they get to have weapons and money? Where do you think they're coming from? Iran is helping to send them. They're helping to train them, to teach them how to make the bombs and how to fire weapons and how to best plan out these terrorist actions. That's what Iran does. And they use the money that they get from those sanctions being lifted to be able to do so. And they're about to have a payday. And they lose nothing. They are still going to be able, if it is correct, if all the news is correct, coming from everyone in the world, including Al Jazeera, that Iran's still going to be able to make an ICBM, which is allowing them to have weapons, bombs that could drop on the heads of Americans here, that they can fire a nuke from Iran to America and take us out, and to Europe, and to Israel, and to Southeast Asia, to all of our allies. That's what they're still going to be able to build. They're still going to be able to develop terrorism around the world. And no one in American news media has the balls to stand up and speak to you and say, here is the evidence. This is how bad this deal is. It's going to threaten you. Do you have loved ones who work in the military or who are in the military or work overseas or are taking a vacation overseas? Because when this deal goes through and Iran has all this money and they can now buy bombs and weapons and travel around the world to kill people, your loved ones are going to be in danger. And if Iran can figure out how to make a ICBM, which they've been working on because Obama's deal didn't stop them, because Biden's deal won't stop them, they're going to be able to drop bombs on you anywhere in the world. This is how it affects you. And no one in the United States will tell you this honestly and let you consider it and then have you say, maybe you should talk to your member of Congress. Maybe you should have this conversation with your senator and tell us, how are we going to be safer when they're increasing the net global terror in the world, when they will be destabilizing the world? Just like we did with Afghanistan when we ran away because Joe Biden has no international policy. Well, guess what? ISIS went into the middle of Africa and they took over a bunch of countries. That's what we saw. Burkina as one example of it. This is what happens. There are consequences and they will affect your life, either directly because you're in the military or indirectly because you happen to be an American on vacation somewhere outside the United States, or even more directly because some terrorist crosses our southern border along with a caravan of some 4,000 to 15,000 people at a time, walks into the United States because no one's checking and the border is wide open, and they wind up being in El Paso. They wind up being in Boulder. They wind up being in California, in nightclubs in Florida, killing Americans. That's how that works. So let me get back to some of the comments here. Because again, if you disagree, no problem. I have my passions. I have my reasoning. I'm trying to explain it to you. I'm giving you the evidence. The links to every site I am talking about, everything I am talking about will be in the description at the end of the live stream. But if you want to ask a question, if you want to say, Mike, I agree, or I don't agree, or I don't understand how you get there, what's your reasoning for this? Please ask away. The phone number is 607-242-1582. It's a dedicated phone line just for you to call into this program. Please call me. Tell me why. Ask a question. Ask me why you, if this isn't enough evidence, I can go back. I can give you months upon months, years upon years of evidence of the things I'm speaking about. So let me go back to Justin is mentioned. The 4 regional conflicts would be extremely hard to manage for America, rather than World War III. And those countries also have nukes of their own that can be used at their own will. Yeah, it's a really, really nasty scenario. And that's why I'm more concerned, which is why I don't want people to think of it as World War III. Because at one side, it's making it more fearful, so people will do whatever their leaders say because they'll say, we're doing something, which is exactly what's happening in Russia right now with Russia-Ukraine. Biden saying, I'm doing something. And we're expected to say, well, isn't that wonderful? He's great. He's such a great leader. Meanwhile, the Ukraine is being hung out to dry and the world is becoming more destabilized and more violent. So yeah, imagine that times 4 with countries that have nukes and more happy to use them. Mike Bowie mentions, Biden is more aligned with Iran and ISIS and Al-Qaeda than Americans. Destabilize the world and get richer. I can't say that directly about Biden, but I can tell you that Biden has a warped sense of values, in my opinion. I don't think he understands the consequences of what he's doing. I don't think that he understands how detrimental he is being to the world and how he is making the world more violent and destabilizing many countries around the world, and that these effects will be lasting and affecting America and the world for decades to come. I don't think he gets it, which is worse. I mean, if he was actually politically aligned with Iran, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, maybe you could have a conversation with him and make him understand the consequences of that, to see why they're wrong, to see why extremism, where they're willing to blow up women and children just because they exist. You can have that discussion with someone who's politically aligned and go, is that really what you want to be aligned with? Same way that I ask progressives and Democrats, do you really support Quentin Brown when he goes out and he decides to try and assassinate someone, when he's an attempted murderer, when he's trying to kill people? Do you really think that you stand by Alec Baldwin for killing a woman? Because that's what he admitted he did. Do you really stand by that? Do you really believe that because of someone's skin color, they are evil and you need to punish them just because of the skin color of that person? See, you can have that discussion with someone who's a reasonable person and they have reasons for what they believe or don't believe, not just feelings. And you can say, okay, and you can show them the error in the discussion. Or you could be shown for yourself where you're wrong about these things, which I beg and ask for all the time if in these programs, to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly, that I'm not missing something here, which I could be. But what we're seeing with Biden is just a lack of understanding. They have a viewpoint, yes, that America is terrible. The progressives think America is terrible. Listen to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar. Listen to, what's her other one? The entire squad. Listen to the Democratic Socialists of America, especially the Ithaca chapter, which is particularly violent. Listen to BLM and Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, otherwise known as PLOT. Listen to the far left. They hate America. They hate Americans. They don't want there to be an America. They don't understand the consequences of what the hell that means. So, yeah, I don't think Biden is aligned with them. I think he just doesn't understand what he's doing, which is also why he doesn't have any international policy. I dare you to ask any Democrat, what is the Biden-Harris international policy? Ask any elected official, go to any Congress member, any senator, ask any Democrat elected, ask them to explain the international policy of the Biden-Harris administration. And they will look at you and they will change the question. They will walk away or they will change the question because it doesn't exist. Doesn't mean, it's one thing to say it's bad or it's good. We could have that debate. It doesn't exist. Justin asks, why do you think Putin is testing his nukes? Intimidation. He's been playing a political game for quite some time now, and he's winning. I just did a video about that. He's winning. See, Putin is in the wonderful situation right now that he doesn't have to attack to be able to be given stuff. We already have the Biden administration since December 13th of 2021 trying to pressure the Ukraine to give up its land, to just hand over some of its land in an act of appeasement to Russia. That's a fact. So we already see that they're trying to do this. And Russia's already winning. Europe and the United States, all of NATO, have absolutely, definitively said they will not send in a single soldier, not 1 foot into the Ukraine to protect the Ukrainian people. They just said that in a couple of days. I'm actually going to get to that in a few minutes, and I'll show you exactly that. They guarantee they're not going to do anything to help. They're going to have sanctions. Russia already has sanctions. Russia has had more sanctions than it has now. So we're not doing something new. Russia's not losing on that. Russia gets more from the Ukraine, from the natural resources of the Ukraine, from the strategic landmass, the positioning of the Ukraine. They win more than they lose by having the Ukraine. That is a fact. It is economically to their advantage. And according to their recent history over the last 75, about 100 years now, this is something that's been normal for them. So this is part of their culture from the Russian point of view. This is part of their economics for the last 70 some odd years. It's been part of their mindset, and it helps to feed their people. That's one of the big reasons why Russia is actually bothering with the Ukraine. It's because they're a breadbasket. They make a lot of food to help feed people throughout the rest of Russia. There is a lot of strategy as well as culture that you never hear about from the American news media because they don't even know what that is. I've lived there. That's the only reason why I know anything about it. I know many Ukrainians. I've lived in Moscow. I've lived in Tbilisi in Soviet Georgia. I've lived in Riga in Latvia. So it's without understanding that context, you miss something in the conversation. Putin is winning, and he doesn't have to fire a single shot to be able to do that. And if he does fire shots, they will win, which has already been admitted by Biden himself. He publicly said so. It's part of the reason why he will not put in a single American troop, not even to save the lives of women and children in Ukraine right now, especially American women and children. We're going to toss a couple $100 million, we're going to toss a couple tens of millions of dollars, which according to the United States budget is meaningless. It's not even a number. We're going to give them $10, $100 million, maybe $200 million, maybe even $300 million, which is meaningless. According to the government, we spend $7 trillion a year. Trillion. We're going to give them a couple $100 million. Means nothing to us. It's a pitiful small number. We gave them handguns. They're facing, and they're going to use those handguns against tanks. Think about that. We gave them a bunch of handguns so they can fight off tanks. And we're going to give them a couple $100 million to buy some bullets? Really? You think that's going to win? That's going to make the difference? Of course not. Because we don't care. Because they've already given up on the Ukraine. And it's only a matter of time between now or later that Russia takes it over. And Putin knows that. So he doesn't need to go in there and take it over. And as we said, we've been saying since the beginning of January, we expect that this is the week, based on land conditions, culture, based on preparations, world sentiment. This is the week. We've been saying it since January, not because Biden's saying it, but because of all of the factors that are involved. This is the week that is most likely it's do or die. And I think we've actually crossed the line. I think the week that just passed was when, if Russia was going to do it, they would have done it. They had the excuse to do it. They decided not to. Because they don't have to, because they are winning. And you may disagree with me on that. You may say, Mike, they're not winning. And I'm going to get to your comments again in 1 second here. But I want you to understand why I'm saying that. I want you to understand why I think that's the case. So let me show you. This is Boris Johnson, who is the Prime Minister of United Kingdom. And I want you to hear part of what he has to say here.
I could give everybody better news about this, but I have to tell you that the picture is continuing to be very grim. And today, as I'm sure you've already picked up, a kindergarten was shelled in what we're taking to be what we know was a false flag operation designed to discredit the Ukrainians, designed to create a pretext, a spurious provocation for Russian action.
Okay, so this is, again, the Prime Minister of England, who has just said, and we heard about this, remember, there was an attack on a kindergarten in the Ukraine. Now, I want you to think about that for 1 second. What did he just say? I don't have good news for you. Well, if things are just starting, why isn't it good news? He doesn't have to phrase it that way. He's already in a defeatist attitude. His conversation, his demeanor is defeatist. It's the same as Joe Biden. They're defeated already. Okay? That's why they're speaking in the way they're speaking. And then he says, well, it's a false flag operation. It just happened. That was on February 17th. On 16th was when it happened. There is no way that Boris Johnson in the United Kingdom is able to find out how or who attacked a kindergarten in the Ukraine. And if you think to tell me, well, Mike, it has to be just the Russians had to do it. It had to be one of the Russian-backed organizations, which, no, it doesn't have to be. You see, they've been fighting in that region since 2014 when the Obama administration handed over the Crimea to Vladimir Putin. They've been fighting nonstop. But why would Russia fire a round at a kindergarten, something they know would get the rest of the world angry? Why would they do that? Even if it's a false flag, why would they attack children, which are guaranteed to anger not only the Ukraine, but the rest of the world? They make too many enemies for themselves. They could do the same thing. If they wanted to goad the Ukrainians into firing on them, into starting a war, they could have taken out a bakery, a car garage. They could have taken out, I don't know, almost anything. But why would you attack a school, a hospital, or a kindergarten? You wouldn't do that. You know who would do that? The United States, the United Kingdom, Europe. We would do that because we need to be seen as heroes. We need to be seen as helping the Ukraine through this whole process. That's why the United Kingdom sent over its personnel to have negotiations. It's why France, under the Macron administration, have sent over their agents, and they are negotiating with Russia right now because the United States has failed. The only thing we've been doing since December is threatening Putin and threatening Russia. And we keep saying the same words over and over again. Economic sanctions, serious, significant, absolutely devastating economic sanctions. That's the only thing we're going to do. Russia's already evaluated all the sanctions that we could put out there. They're not worse than actually taking over the Ukraine. But Biden needs a win, much like with the Iran nuclear deal. Biden needs a win, and he doesn't have anything. He needs to be seen as a strong leader. So if he could, as an example, if NATO could attack a kindergarten very carefully to make sure that no one actually dies, but if they were to attack a kindergarten and blame it on Russia, and Russia, who has no interest in taking over, they have lots of interest in threatening people and intimidating, but they don't need to attack to get what they want. They're already on that path. Then that makes them look worse. If Russia continues to not do anything, well, then NATO, Biden, they look strong. They look like they won. They look like they did something. So I'm not saying that that's the case, but you have to ask that question, considering the nature of the conversations that are happening, considering that they're telling you it's an absolute false flag, even though no one's investigated, even though no one knows what's going on. It's such a false flag that, and it's so genuine. This is so real. This is being reported by Deutsche Welle. This is the German TV news. And Deutsche Welle, I want you to see, this is their report on that very same kindergarten. This is what you're seeing on the screen is the kindergarten. They were there, and I want you to see something here.
Kindergarten in the town of Stanica Luhanska was hit by a shell. Now,
Did you? Oh, I hate this.
What if you could get rid of your kitchen garbage at the push of a button? Hey, I'm Matt from...
I hate that. There we go.
But
so I want you to see something. Do you know something about the people that's surrounding her? This is the vice chairman, vice president of the Ukraine. That's her. Do you notice something about the people that are surrounding around her?
The kids are at home, but a visitor is expected. Ukraine's deputy prime minister.
Do you notice the people? Look at what they're wearing.
Irina Vereshchuk
Look at all the people who
the
are
damage.
around her. Look at this woman. Okay? Do you see that dress? She's in a flak jacket. She's in a dress. She's in a mini skirt. This place is so dangerous. We're seeing how many people have been walking around her who are speaking with her, that if they're not in the press and if they are not someone who is an elected official, they're not in any kind of armor. Don't believe me? Keep watching.
We do not.
The press. Oh, yeah. We got cameras on. We're the press. See, we got helmets on. No one else is wearing helmets. We've got a flak jacket on. These people aren't wearing flak jackets. It's so dangerous here.
Provoke. We do not want an escalation. We want peace, we want protection and security for our people, especially for those who live here, for pensioners and children, and those who cannot protect themselves.
And her very words are escalating the situation. by saying that this is something they're attacking she's escalating the situation. She's making it more difficult to negotiate diplomatically. This is, it's aggravating because there's so many layers to this. And when you deal with international policy, there are multiple layers. There are many levels to this. Am I saying that the Russians didn't do it? I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying that you have to consider that they might not have, because the interests of other nations are served to blame Russia for it, even though Russia has its own advantages that they are playing on here too. And it wouldn't be the first time that the United States has actually caused an incident that causes other nations to react. It wouldn't be the first time for Germany or the United Kingdom or just about any nation in the world to do that. Every nation in the world at some point has done that. And we do know that of the nations in the world, especially the nations that are deeply involved in this, the only nation that is desperate for a political win is the United States and Joe Biden. Russia isn't in desperate win. People in Russia, in Moscow, they're not considering war. They're relaxed. They're not worried about World War III. Up until this event happened with the kindergarten, the people of the Ukraine weren't worried. In fact, most of them are walking around almost every day.
Gunfire can be heard frequently now here in Stanitsa Luhanska. Just before
street, although nobody knows.
This
It's
is
all
one of the guys.
unpredictable.
Just
You and
a
I
regular
were standing
citizen.
here now, and anything can fly by.
He's been living there all his life. This is a region that has been under conflict, shooting, since 2014. He's talking about the fact that people are going about their lives. They're outside. Yes, occasionally things do happen, but they're living. This is meant to give you an impression in your mind when you look at it, to escalate this, to then give weight and to say, those guys are bad, these guys are good, there are no shades of gray, and I must obey. I must support the good guys and demonize the bad guys, and there is no shades of gray, and no one would possibly lie to you because no one has any alternative motive. That's not true. And that's how we have 15 years in a war zone like Afghanistan or over in Iraq and so forth. Let me get to some of the comments here. By the way, Justin, the Alpha, if I haven't answered your questions, if I'm not answering some of the things you're asking about, please let me know if I have not been clear, if I'm not making it make sense. Not that you have to agree with it, but is it making sense? Am I making my position clear? Can you see what I'm saying? Justin says, true, ISIS is in East Africa, in Muslim countries like Somalia, Ethiopia, Sudan. Other African countries like Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, South Africa are more allies of the West with more weapons at least. He's speaking back when I was talking about Iran and its influence and Afghanistan and the consequences of running away from Afghanistan. And therefore ISIS was released and they went to Africa, especially Western Africa, and some Eastern Africa too, and just created havoc and created civil wars. Justin goes on to say, a lot of people say Putin's goal is to bring back the old Soviet Union countries altogether, so once Ukraine is captured, he will invade others. Probably. Putin is an old member of the KGB. He came up and he lived, by the way, he grew up in the Soviet Union. That was the natural way of life for him. His life was almost completely in the Soviet Union, which I've lived in under that Soviet regime. So it's not unusual. There are about 30% of the people of the Soviet, what we used to know as the Soviet Union, that think that it was a good thing and that they should go back to that. So he's not alone in that. I mean, if that's a system you've grown up in, you always lived in, you were always able to feed yourself, you were always able to feed your friends and your family, and you had success in it, why wouldn't you want to see it back? So there's one level of it. Two, Russia is more powerful as a Soviet bloc nation as opposed to being the Commonwealth of Independent States, or the CIS as it exists right now. There is more capability and more strategic benefit to having a single bloc nation as opposed to having a bunch of nations that are squabbling with each other. So there's a few reasons for it, a lot of reasons for it. But that's just trying to give you, again, some more background and some more food for thought that the American news media absolutely rejects you thinking about, and the world news media is talking about as we speak. So yes, I could see Putin doing it, and he has reasons. Whether or not I think they're good reasons doesn't matter. He has reasons, and from his point of view, and from some of the people, at least 30% of people from the old Soviet Union, they think it's a good idea. I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to think it's good, but I do understand why he thinks it's good. There is a difference. Dow says, I'm sure Putin is very aware that the ideology of the Soviets is dead. Not quite. Authoritarian power, however, that is probably something that is achievable without having to reinstitute communism. And I would agree with that. Yes, you can be authoritarian without being communist, and he is an authoritarian, which again goes to having a single Soviet bloc, which is more powerful and more easily managed than separate nations. Dow goes on to say, for any kind of insulation of Russia against the world, inflation and economic depression, they would need to secure the breadbasket of Eastern Europe, which is the Ukraine. Absolutely. So if other Soviet satellites are targeted, it is going to be for the resources that Russia needs, not just to reunite the old territories, which is correct, which is why we were recently in Kazakhstan, or rather, they were in Kazakhstan, which is one of the nuclear stockpiles. It has one of the largest uranium deposits in the world. It is strategically important, especially in looking at the Middle East. So he's being very careful about where he's going. Does he need Latvia? Does he need Lithuania? Does he need Poland? Not necessarily. One or two of them, maybe. Not all three. He doesn't need to go on a world-conquering spree at this moment. It's not necessary. And if anything, it might not be advantageous. If he takes too many nations, if he takes nations that weren't part of the old Soviet Union, now he's doing something different. Now he's invading places that are, most of the world considers the Ukraine still part of the Soviet Union. That the Soviet Union is commonly, look at every American you know, and this is true for a decent amount of the rest of the world, that people who are over the age of, I'd say, anyone over the age of about 40 still remembers the Soviet Union, still thinks of what we call Russia, which is interchangeable with the old Soviet Union and all the nations that are in it. As long as he's not taking countries that aren't part of that old group, most people aren't really caring. They don't really care. They're not really worried about it. No one's really going to argue about it. It's only if he starts taking countries that weren't originally in there. Now that's considered expansionist. That would be something else. You'd hear a different argument from the rest of the world. Hot Chicks agrees with Dow. And Justin says, I never heard about ISIS in West Africa, really. Only in North Africa and East Africa, Muslim nations mostly. That's because they're not very successful in West Africa. But in Western Africa, which would be in the Congo, that would be, it's over by the bump, the Horn. They're in Morocco. That would be Libya. That's all considered Western Africa. So, and that also would be in Ivory Coast, and there's a couple of other countries. There's 46 nations, 36? 36 or 46, I think it's 36 nations that make up Africa. They have influence in many of these nations. It's just not something that's often talked about. I mean, really, Burkina Faso, nobody knew where that was. Although the nation in one form or another has been around for, I don't know, 30 years, but no one knows. No one cares. Most people don't know about the difference between Ivory Coast and maybe Morocco or Nigeria or Chad. Most people don't even know most people don't know these countries exist, let alone where they are in the world, let alone what's the government behind them. So that's the reason why most people aren't hearing that. Now, Justin, you may be more aware, but probably there are ISIS agents in the United States. Whoa, what happened to did they just kill me? Did the internet gods just attack me? There, I'm back. Oh, am I? Yes, I am. Okay. Internet gods don't like me. So talking about Africa, so they are there, they have elements there, but they may not be very powerful, but they are existing and they are exerting themselves. To the best of the knowledge that I have about it, which again, may not be complete. Dow says, Kazakhstan is, I think I saw, a producer of 40% of the world's uranium. Yes, I believe they are about, I know it's more than 30%. I believe you're right, it's 40, but I know it's over 30% in Kazakhstan. So again, this is why it's very strategic. Putin, you don't have to like him. You don't have to agree with him. He's not stupid. He is anything but stupid. You don't get to go as high as he was in the KGB and be stupid. That's not reality. He's a very smart man. He may be a very authoritarian man. He may be a very vicious man, but he is not stupid. Those two things do not go together. Being a dictator doesn't make you stupid. Being authoritarian, being militaristic doesn't make you stupid. And in particular, he is one of the best diplomats in Europe at this time. He dances with diplomacy like most people, they stumble. And you can see that, just look at him talking international. Look at when he met with Biden. Listen to his answers, listen to what Biden say. Which one sounds better? I don't care which one you agree with. I don't care which one you feel for. Listen to them. He's not a stupid man. He's being very strategic. And that should make you wonder about why is he going to, I'm not saying that he can't go to war. I am saying he will win the war, which he knows. But why go there when he's already winning, when everyone in NATO has already given up on the Ukraine, said that they don't want it in, or essentially have said that they will never let the Ukraine into NATO, that they're not going to put in a single troop, that they're only going to give them small arms, which they know cannot defend and win, that they're looking at decades of infighting, trying to turn the Ukraine into Afghanistan. And yes, in Germany, they have mentioned that if Russia takes over the Ukraine, well, it's going to become like Afghanistan, where they're going to be supplying weapons to rebels, and there will be constant fighting for the next decade or two, which is terrifying. Again, the world destabilizes. And a lot of this has to do with Biden. Okay, going on. Mike says, when you were in Russia, yes, I was in Russia. Да, я знаю по-русски, да. Москва. Я работаю Москва, да. I worked in Moscow. When you were in Russia, I heard things were bad economically in 1994 because of Western influence. Putin wanted to restore the old Soviet Union's independence. I was there in 91. I was there for the coup attempt that happened. I was there and I was in Soviet Georgia when they started their civil war. and I did spend some time in Riga, in Latvia. So I spent a year and a half every day, day in and day out, for a little over a year and a half that I was in the Soviet Union, mostly in Moscow. And yes, I speak Russian. Can almost read Russian. It's been a long time. And my speaking is poor. But yes, I do speak Russian. And I do know people of Russia. I got to know the history and the background of a lot of things there. So yes, the economy went bad in 94 because in 91 it was transitioning. That transition continued through 94 because they went from the 7-year and 5-year plans into a more roughly 1 to 3 year plans economically. And they started to introduce competition, which they didn't have before. And people had to compete for wages and businesses. And there was a massive amount of corruption that was existing at the same time that was being integrated in, and a lot of gangs that were being integrated into that. So that's why they were having such a difficult time. Not so much because of the influence of the West, as it was the transition from communism into the current form, which is still heavy authoritarian, but also much more capitalistic. And you're talking about people who have been doing that for 75 years of their lives. That's all they've known was communism. And you're trying to bring them and their children and everyone who's educated and taught nothing but communism into capitalism. It's a very difficult transition. It takes a generation, realistically, at least, just to cycle through the people who were taught nothing but communism and to get into the cycle of people who know something that isn't communism. So that's why they had that difficulty. Not so much because of the West and the Western influence. The West really had very little to do with that overall. Dow mentions that ISIS is more active in the Sudan, Somalia, because of their previous successes amongst the populace. Sudan had an Islamic jihad. Yeah, they do. They definitely did. And March post-British occupation, Gordon of Khartoum is based on that story. That's true. There had the genocide of the Sudan. Absolutely disgraceful. Genocide went on for well over a decade, based on religion. And it's really sad. And actually, what's his name? He played Rhodey in Iron Man 2 and 3. I know his name. He was in the Ocean 11 movies. Black guy. I know his name. He's a good actor. Anyway, he was actually one of the people fighting for the people of the Sudan, trying to end that genocide that was happening there. And that genocide was supported by ISIS as well as other Islamic radicals. Just to give you guys some background. Again, there's a lot of information here. I've been following this for a really, really long time. So it gives you some influence there. Justin mentions that the people fear of Putin invading Poland also. Do you think, well, and also, as in Russia, in Poland, there is a percentage, maybe about 20%, 15%, of the older people who look at the old Soviet Union and they had fond memories. Remember, by this time, that would have made those people young kids, early teens. They have a very different view of what socialism is to what we know it to be. They have different memories. They grew up in it. They had friends in it. They were able to eat. Now they have competition. Not everyone gets to eat. Not everyone gets to keep things. They have to work harder for the things that they want. Now, mind you, they get to have more things. They get to have more diversity, more quality. They get to have a better quality of life, but you have to work harder for that quality of life as well. So there is that back and forth with that. But looking at, and also some of the younger kids in Poland. And I was speaking to a couple of people very recently who live in Poland, and there is maybe another 10% of the Polish youth who have grown up like here in America, where they think socialism is a great idea. They think Che Guevara is a good guy. They think Mao was a gentle, kind leader, not responsible for over 120 million people dying. They look at people like Stalin and think that he's a strong leader, not that he killed 80 million of his own people. Not World War II. These are all murders that were done after World War II in the name of communism. And so we have people like Bernie Sanders who's selling the idea of socialism. It's so great. It's so wonderful. We have people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez trying to sell socialism. We want to be democratic socialists. It's such a great thing. And we are exporting these ideas from the United States to the rest of the world. And we are doing that not only through our media, our news, and our entertainment, and the movies we have. We have people like LeBron James. We have people like all of our entertainers that are pushing these ideas. And we have our professors like Dr. Ricky Jones out of the University of Louisville that are exporting these ideas into these kids' minds, especially whether the kid comes to America to go to school and goes back to Poland or if they're in there. So we are seeing that there is a subculture that's trying to put these things back in. That is also a factor and part of the reason why people are afraid, because the overwhelming majority of people in Poland absolutely oppose socialism. They absolutely oppose communism, and they will fight. But they have this subculture of these kids who are replacing them, who are coming in, who have this false idea of the beauty and wonder of socialism, even though they've never spent a day with it, and they're not listening to the people who did live with it. So the fear in Poland isn't per se Putin. It's the loss of their culture and the loss of the understanding of the struggles that the people went through under Lech Walesa in the 80s, in the 90s, the deep struggles and fights that they were having before that, when they had the solidarity movement in Poland since the 50s and 60s, that they were fighting against Russia throughout that entire time, against the Soviet Union, that entire time. So these kids don't appreciate that reality, that history, and they're looking at people like AOC and Bernie Sanders telling them a false narrative, and they're buying it because it looks great in a movie. It looks great when you see people like the Kardashians, or you see what's his name? He's that rapper who Beyonce and her husband, whoever his name is, I don't care. Who went down to Cuba to have their kids and think it's a wonderful place, like Sean Penn, as he's doing his movies and he's talking about how wonderful it is. And Michael Moore doing his movies and telling you how great it is. And they're millionaires and multimillionaires. And it can't be that bad if multimillionaires are telling you it's the best life possible. This is fantastic. No, that's not how it works. So that's what I think the real fear in Poland is. At least that's what I'm hearing it is. They want to maintain their identity, and they want to maintain their separation from anything that is communist or socialist. And so that is raising tensions even more than any possible move by Putin in trying to take them over. I don't think he's necessarily looking at them, but I think they're terrified that he could. That's my belief, but you could tell me I'm wrong. Yes, Mike Bowie, it was Don Cheadle that I was talking about before when I was talking about the Sudan. Don Cheadle worked on a couple of programs, not only for Rwanda, but also in the Sudan to help people with the genocides in those nations. And I do have a lot of respect for him for having done that. Dow mentioned South Africa lately has devolved into a tribalistic I can't say that word, of communist doctrine. Same factors that are affecting. Notice we're looking at all these countries that are now looking at more authoritarian, socialistic and communistic ideology, these are, in every one of these countries, the people who are now making those moves were all people who were educated in the colleges that have been sold this idea of socialism from their schools, from their entertainment, and mostly from America influence. So you're seeing that. And Canada is one of the great examples of that. And I have it here. Oh, by the way, I did also want to show you that from Politico, and this was from Politico today, earlier today, Kamala Harris was making it very clear that, quote, the allied relationship is such that we have agreed that the deterrence effect of sanctions is still a meaningful one. We will sincerely hope that there is a diplomatic path out of this moment. And this is because the Ukraine, their Minister Zelensky, has asked for the United States and the rest of Europe to enact sanctions right now. And they won't. The United States won't. In fact, in December, the Senate Democrats, United States Senate, the Democrats voted to maintain the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Republicans wanted to place sanctions on that to try to stop Putin from getting to where we are today. And they want to do that in December. And the Democrats voted against it. Biden knows he cannot get sanctions right now. Not going to happen. His party will not allow it because they don't care about the Ukraine and they don't want to deal with it. They won't do it. And many of them support progressivism and socialism and democratic socialism. So they're not going to fight against that. Senator Blumenthal isn't fighting against this. He's taking money from the Communist Party of the United States. He is going and holding speeches at the Communist Party of the United States. Senator Richard Blumenthal out of Connecticut. And you think he's going to vote to sanction Russia? Are you serious? And by the way, yes, we did cover that on this in the program. You can see the video about Richard Blumenthal going to the Communist Party for their support and talking about socialism and talking it up. And he's a senator from Connecticut. There you go. So they have fully thrown the Ukraine under a bus at every way, shape, and form, and they don't care. And they're doing this even though Harris, Dianne Feinstein, people of California can't stand them. And their polls are reflecting that. But I wanted to show you something about Canada. There's a couple things about Canada I want to show. Here's a meme that's been going around. So we have the names of the people who donated to the truckers' convoy, but not the names of Ghislaine Maxwell's customers. That says something about where we see things right now. And why is Canada such a authoritarian nation at this moment? Because Justin Trudeau is a fan of socialism. He's a fan of the way China runs its nation. Yes, China, the very same China that is trying to genocide the Uyghurs, the very same China that made the leadership of Hong Kong, the elected leaders for Hong Kong, disappear. The very same China that is threatening to take over Taiwan by force. Yeah, that China. And yes, Justin Trudeau did say to a women's group in Canada that he admires the Chinese government, that he admires socialism. We've heard him say this many times. And he's enacting authoritarian actions. That's why we know that, one, he tried to steal the money private citizens gave to an organization, to other citizens in his country, and he decided to enact emergency powers so he could steal that money. That's authoritarian. He has enacted emergency powers the first time ever in Canada so that he can crush dissent. Because whether you agree with the truckers or not, that's dissent. Now, you can tell me it's illegal dissent. You can say it's legal dissent. That's a different argument. But it is dissent. It is a protest. And this is the man who, before he got elected, said, protests are absolutely necessary. They're wonderful things. This is the man who was supporting the BLM riots and protests in Canada. He was perfectly happy for people to protest the way that he likes. And the moment that people don't do what he likes, he's calling up emergency powers. Think about it. If he had any other intention, if he wasn't so authoritarian, you think he might have had an actual meeting, an actual discussion with any of the truckers to find out what their concerns were, to see if there was any kind of negotiation he could make to get them to go away before he had to use the full power and weight of government to steal their money and destroy their lives. That's an autocrat. That's a dictatorship. That's not freedom in any way, shape, or form. It wasn't his last thing. He's using emergency powers that have never been used, that were meant to be used in World War II kind of scenarios. And he's just using it for a bunch of truckers. Really? A bunch of truckers who committed no crimes, harmed no people, destroyed no property. And he decides he has to use, essentially, he calls out the military to round up the people and steals their money. Yeah, that's a problem. So that's why we know who donated to the truckers and have been put on a list and have been isolated by the Canadian government. And we know that they are using the police, just like the military, to round people up and to forcibly take them out, to make them go away, to make this story go away. Because the thing about the truckers isn't that they were protesting, it's that they were popular as they were protesting. It's that other nations were paying attention to them protesting, that other people in free nations were giving money to the protesters to enable them to make their voices be heard and to hold the government accountable. And you don't get to make a socialist government, a progressive government accountable. You don't get to do that. They get to hold you accountable. You don't get to do that to them because they're about a serfdom. You are a serf. You are a peasant. And the political progressive leaders of these nations, they are the neo-nobles. It's like the Middle Ages all over again. They get to rule you. You don't get to rule them. And they prove this by their actions over and over again. In fact, it was so bad that the police chief of Ottawa resigned over the emergency powers because it was an overreach of the power of the prime minister, that this was wrong. He quit. So they have an interim police force. And by the way, when you look at the stories and you see the story that says crackdown, and I'm going to get to the comments, folks. I promise. But I want to just give you this understanding that you're not really seeing in the media because they're chopping this up. They're hiding this information from you. When you look at the crackdown on Freedom Convoy continues as Canadian police arrest at least 170 protesters. Think about this. We know they arrested 170 people. At least 170 people were arrested Friday and Saturday because of the convoy. And you see this right here, okay? And this is coming from USA Today, left-leaning news. Here's the part that you didn't get. Interim Police Chief Stephen Bell said at a press conference Saturday that 47 additional people were arrested Saturday. Their operation to clear the protesters is not over. Here's the thing that the news media just told you, and I guarantee you didn't notice. They arrested 147 people. 107 people for the protest. Then, for some completely different reason, a different group of 47 Canadians were arrested under the same emergency powers. Did you notice that? At least 170 people were arrested Friday and Saturday. Additionally, 47 people were arrested on Saturday. You've already told me that the numbers include Saturday. You already told me that the people being arrested because of the Freedom Convoy were 170. That included Saturday. It's already been made clear. The writing isn't idiotic. This is not Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez trying to put together an essay. This isn't her writing a bill. This is someone who actually understands the English language, or at least I think they do. There's two of them. So they seem to have a grasp of the English language, so they wouldn't say 47 additional people unless that is separate of the 170 people that were already arrested. And I want you to see one final thing about the police in Canada that this is happening with, okay? Because, and I cannot confirm this, I cannot confirm the source, I cannot confirm the authenticity of this. I want to be very clear about that. This is making an allegation. I cannot independently verify. The news media absolutely won't verify this. They won't even acknowledge that this exists as a question. So what we can see is this is the police, the Musical Ride 2022. That's the Canadian Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and this is their Musical Ride Tour, which they do annually, once every year. So this is a communication amongst members of the police that participate in the Musical Ride Tour for 2022. And they are looking at this overreach of power, this government authoritarianism, the emergency powers, and they are cheering this. They are happy. They're drinking to this. They're having a great time, and they want it to last not just through the weekend. They want this to go through weeks for this. And you may say, why? Because they're able to go and eat and have great, look at that, how they're just sitting back, relaxing, eating great food in an empty room, having good meals, buffets, because they have to get rid of these people, that they are making bank. They're making money for overtime, tons of overtime that they're getting paid to get these people out. And they want it to last as long as possible. And also, there are a few members, like allegedly Andrew Nixon, who says, time for the protesters to hear our jackboots on the ground. Is he joking? Because it's a pretty poor taste joke. By the way, Andrew Nixon is an officer of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. He is part of the Musical Ride of 2022, that event of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. This is allegedly a leak of evidence of the police talking about the great time they are having in stomping on people's rights, getting paid, and eating well. And one guy's talking about it as if it were jackboots, with a strong reference to authoritarianism and the destruction of people's liberties, freedoms, and just life itself. And no one in the news media will even bother to look at this. They won't even denounce it. By the time we started this program, not one credible news source around the world was even willing to say this is false. They won't even acknowledge it exists. And you know what's funny about that? For the longest time, for about 2 weeks out of the 3 weeks that this event, that this Canadian truck driver protest has been going on, definitely the first week, not one member of the news media would mention that that existed either. Makes you wonder. Let me get to some of the comments here. And again, folks, at any point, you can call in to 607-242-1582 to share your thoughts. Whether you agree with me or not doesn't matter. To share your thoughts, to tell me what you think about these things that we've been discussing, about some of the comments. And you can also type in like Dal and Mike Bowie, Jason and Justin, and so many others. You can easily make your comments heard too by reaching us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, DLive, on Discord. So any way you wish. And again, you can agree with me, you can disagree with me, you can tell me you think something else, you may have information I don't have. I'm always happy to hear your voices. So picking up, you see, Dal Grimm, when I was talking about the Soviet Union, about authoritarianism, and I believe that's the root that caused Justin Trudeau to act the way that he is because he was classically trained in colleges in Canada by the very progressive elites, both in America and those that they trained around the world, that they have infiltrated different colleges all around the country, like the University of Louisville, where they have been teaching kids for decades that, socialism is great, being authoritarian, and here we have Trudeau. Dow says, Bernie Sanders, with how fantastic Cuban healthcare is. Yeah. When the non-foreign servicing hospitals are completely not the same. Well, again, yeah, Bernie Sanders stands up and he says, hey, it's socialism so great. Every time he's ever been anywhere that he could actually see socialism, he's been treated as royalty. He's been given the VIP treatment. I lived there for a year and a half. And here's the thing. When people tell you socialism's great, ask them, have you ever lived in a socialist country? I go to college campuses and I have conversations and I do speeches at college campuses, especially I talk about First Amendment, Second Amendment. I talk about communism because I have actually experienced it. Unlike most of the professors in the colleges that I speak at, unlike most of the people who are telling you that you should love socialism, that it's a great idea. Unlike most of these people, including Bernie Sanders, I lived in a socialist nation for a year and a half every day like a common person. Yes, I had extra money. I was wealthy, but I was riding on the same bus. I was going and I was in the same dacha. I was going to the same restaurants. I was walking around the same streets, getting the same taxi cabs. And yes, I speak Russian. I was doing it by myself. So I understand that. They don't, Jay-Z, Bernie Sanders, Sean Penn, they're not getting that treatment. They get to go to baseball games. People don't even get to have baseball in some of these countries. You know what? I had to have a tooth pulled when I was in Russia, in Moscow. It cost me $20. $20 American, which at the time was a 5-to-1 exchange rate. The average person, I think the average rent, as I remember, was 15 rubles. To give you an idea, it was literally about 6 months' pay that I paid with $20 because I didn't care. Actually, it was more. It's about a year's pay. If you were to translate the money, I paid $20. Cut through a line of people who were there for 3 hours. I cut to the front of the line, paid $20, took me straight into the room. I was there 15 minutes. People had been there for 3 hours. I was there 15 minutes. They walked me into what looked like a torture chamber, to be honest. Walked me into the dentist's room. They pulled out Novocaine, not the watered down Novocaine. That's a different bottle. They got an actual bottle of Novocaine and filled up a syringe so that they could pull one of my teeth. And I was out of that place in 30 minutes. In and out. 30 minutes cost me $20. And everyone who's paying rubles, everyone who's on the government health care, do you know how long they were waiting? On average, 3 hours. But they don't have those stories because they've never actually lived that life. I did. So I can tell you how bad communism is and how bad socialism is. But they're going to tell you it's wonderful because on paper it looks great. And they were treated really well because they're the bait for you. They are the bait to get you on the hook. You're never going to have the experience that Trudeau had. You're never going to have the experience that Jay-Z had. You're going to get on the hook. They are the bait. And that's sad. Trudeau is using overwhelming force, which Dow mentions. Mike Bowie mentions Emergencies Act to basically force vaccinations. No, the Emergency Act isn't even to get the vaccinations. It's to just punish them. Let's be very honest with each other, folks. And not because you're not being honest, because the news media has trained you not to think about this and not to understand the consequences. I spent 2 days listening to the Parliament in Canada as they were speaking over and over again and attacking Trudeau and asking him, why in the world does he need emergency powers? What gives him the right to call in emergency powers for a protest that no one has ever done that for? No matter how many protests and how many riots they've had before, Canada has never done that, especially since he's never spoken to the truckers. He never tried any diplomacy. He didn't try to negotiate. He went with the full force, overwhelming force of the government to steal their money, their property, and damage their lives. So this isn't about, it stopped being about the vaccines the moment that this started being covered by the major international news media. When it was floating around on Facebook, kind of like this is right now, when this is floating around and we're hearing that police officers are talking about how they're having a great time jackbooting the public and getting paid overtime and very well to do that. So they want to extend the jackbooting session, which I find insulting. It's all about punishment. How dare you oppose me? How dare you embarrass the government? How dare you think that you have a right? That's what it is about. That's why they are clearing it out, because it was effective, because people remembered that they have the power in nations that aren't autocracies and dictatorships. People have rights and freedoms, and they get to choose, and politicians serve them. One of the biggest things that people have forgotten for so many years is that politicians serve the people, not the other way around. Politicians don't get to make decisions and we just have to live with it. We get to tell them what to do. And if they don't do what we say, we replace them. Even in Canada, even in the United Kingdom, in France, in Germany. Yes, even though those countries have less freedom than the United States, they get to say it too. And when they decided they wanted to say that, Trudeau lost his mind. It wasn't about the vaccinations. It was about punishing them as a lesson so that every other Canadian and people around the world can see that if you dare honk your horn, if you dare oppose the government, if you do not obey, you will be punished. They will come and take your money. They will put you on a list. They will make sure that you are ostracized. You will be unpersoned from social media, and you will not be allowed to live your life. They're going to punish you. That's what it was about. They don't care about vaccinations. We got states and countries. Boris Johnson is about to take all of the restrictions of the pandemic, and he's going to throw them out the window. Another week and a half. He's already having the conversations about he's gotten rid of almost all of them already, and now he's going to get rid of the last of them thrown out the window. In New York State, the bluest of blue states, where they absolutely desperately need fear to get people to vote for them, Kathy Hochul is still holding on to the science so that children must wear a mask even though they don't work, and that adults don't need to wear anywhere in the state. Because that makes no sense whatsoever when you're talking about children who the CDC has definitively done studies and determined they are the lowest risk group in the world, period. But yet they have to wear a mask. Adults don't have to wear a mask. This is about obedience. One big lesson in obedience, and they're smacking everyone in the world upside the head with it, especially in nations where we thought we were much more free than we actually are turning out to be. And we're not as free as we used to be because we're not asking questions and we are just obeying. And that's got to scare you, because it scares me. You don't have to agree with me. You can tell me, Mike, I do not see it the way you see it. You can tell me, Mike, that's the wrong conclusion, and I see your evidence and I don't agree with your evidence. That's perfectly fine. I would love to hear you explain that to me, to tell me how I am wrong in the conclusion I have just presented to you and what I've been talking about all day today, because this is yet another example of people in the government, politicians, who are saying, well, there's a problem and we're going to save you from it. And they don't want you to think about, and you created the problem in the first bloody place. The problem started 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I'm not supposed to think that far back. I'm not supposed to think of the consequences of what you did and how it affects me today and how it's going to continue to affect us into the future, which is why I love this program. We have to always think about the consequences. The kids 20, 30 years ago, we had professors like Rick Jones, who taught people like Trudeau, just like they were teaching Quinton Brown about progressivism. Quinton Brown decided to go out and shoot someone. Trudeau decided to become the Prime Minister of Canada. And now Trudeau is doing the same thing that Quinton Brown is doing, which is exactly what the progressives want them to do, to punish people for not obeying. They created the problem, and now they created the solution to the problem, and you're supposed to thank them and to vote for them and to give them power and to bow to their power, because you have no power, they have all the power, and you have been trained to do that over and over again. And I think the people who are most upset about this aren't the people who agree with me. It's not even the people who disagree with me because of principle. It's the people who disagree with me because they cannot argue this, because there's no evidence to refute what I am saying. That the conclusion is so logical that they are pissed off because they have been deceived. And it is something that they are seeing, and they don't want to believe it. Look at Bill Maher. This man is a leftist radical for decades of his life. He begged and pleaded in 2019 for you to be in a recession. He wanted people, Americans, to go through a recession, to lose their jobs, to lose their homes, for their children to be hungry. He said it. May 2019. Yes, Bill Maher did. I covered it on this channel. He went out and he said in 2020, I believe it was October of 2020, Bill Maher went out and said, you must elect Joe Biden, even if he committed sexual assaults, because it doesn't matter. Even if he did that, even if there is a Me Too, you have to vote for Joe Biden because he's a Democrat and because of feelings. That's what Bill Maher said. That's how badly Bill Maher wanted to screw you over, and it was about his power. And now, after the fact, in 2022, when he's realized that his life is being affected, that it's affected his friends and family, it's affecting his money and his power because he's not at the top of the list of these power brokers. Now he wants to be pissed off and say, you can't do this anymore. You've gone too far. You're taking my power now. How dare you? That is what Bill Maher is upset about. He doesn't care about you. He didn't care about you for years, decades. He cares about his own personal power and his feelings, the way he likes it. And he's angry right now, and he's angrier than everyone else because it's now affecting him, and he has no argument to say, oh, this should never have happened. He's the reason why it did happen. I don't know. But maybe people don't agree with me. Maybe you think I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know. Am I making sense? Does this make sense, folks? By the way, folks, I think you're a great audience. I really enjoy you. By the way, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. If you've made it this far into the conversation, 3 hours in, and I'm going to be ending this in a little bit, but if you've made it 3 hours, if you've made it 2 hours, an hour, if you listened for half an hour and you found it interesting, that if it was informative, if it made you think about the politics that are happening every day around you and affecting you and the world, and subscribe. That's all we ask. It's free, costs you nothing. Why? Because we want to get to 1,234 subscribers. That's it. I want to get to 1,234 subscribers. Why 1,234 subscribers? Because I like the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'll also tell you, and what happens if once we hit 1, 2, 3, 4? Then I'm going to say, let's try and get to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it. Okay? That's the reason. Is it stupid? Absolutely. Is it silly? Absolutely. But as a side benefit of that, it means we're reaching more people. We're having more of a conversation. And I can tell you, in 15 years of doing political commentary, of doing this very thing, I can tell you, politicians watch this show. They look and read your conversations, our comments, both live stream and afterwards. They have their staff watch these programs on a regular basis. I know because I know many of these politicians in central New York and several of them in Congress or running for Congress at this moment. Known them for years. I have their personal phone numbers. And they talk to me about the show, about what they agree with, what they disagree with, about some of the comments that you guys make, some of the phone calls that you guys make. They talk to me about it. Not often, not all the time, but they do. So they're paying attention. If we're able to get more people, if we can get to 1,234 people, we have that many more politicians who are going to listen, who are going to come on to this show, who are going to answer questions, who are going to be afraid of not getting your vote. And I'm not telling you who to vote for. I'm not telling you to vote Democrat, Libertarian, Conservative, Republican. You can vote whatever you want. I'm trying to make you think about, does that politician deserve your vote? And if they do, great, give it to them. If they don't give it to them. That's your decision. I just want you to have the information and understand the consequences of what these people are doing to us and how it's affecting not only us, but around the world. Because the rest of the news media won't have the conversation I'm having with you. They don't want to speak to you on any one subject for more than 30 seconds. That's how long. They want you to have the memory of a goldfish on any issue that is going to affect your life and your kids and your job and everything about you. They don't want you to think about it for more than 30 seconds. That's why the average news segment is a minute and a half. A minute and a half. With a high number of those segments, 30 seconds. They don't want you to think. They want you to obey. I don't agree with that. That's why I ask you to subscribe. That's why I ask you to help us try and get to 1,234 subscribers. Because I want people to think. Not necessarily, doesn't mean they have to agree with me. But I want you to think. Because that'll make a better country. That makes a better world. Call me naive, but that's what I think makes a better country. And that's what I think makes a better world. All right, so let's start looking at some final thoughts here, folks. You tell me, guys, what do you think? What are you thinking about all this? Have I made sense throughout all of this? Has it been clear to see that where Trudeau has gotten his point of view? Is it obvious that he is using the Royal Canadian Military Police as a weapon, as a cudgel to beat down the public? Thank you, Dow. Dow says he agrees. And if you don't, it's okay. No one on this program will beat up on you for disagreeing. You can call in and disagree. You can type in and disagree. No one is going to hold disagreeing against you. You have that right, especially here. But that's a right anyone has everywhere in the world. You have the First Amendment right by birth. You have a right to speak your mind. And you can say, I don't agree. That's fine. The only thing we ask for is no personal attacks. That's it. Mike says, I always learn something new tuning in. I try. That's why I do my homework, to try and present you the things that the media doesn't want you to know. And again, you can think whatever you want of it. You can make whatever conclusion you want from it. But I just want you to be able to know, because you can't be abused, you can't be used, you can't be forced to obey if you understand what's happening around you. They can't use simple tricks. They have to do things like they did to the truckers. They have to do things like what they did in writing the letter for Quintex Brown. They have to be overt. They have to stand out. And that gives you an opportunity to say, that's not freedom. Because jackboots on the ground, that's not freedom. That's not even close to freedom. You know? When we say, oh, we're going to help our allies by throwing them under a bus and not giving them any real support because we've given up on them. That's what we heard Kamala Harris say. Same thing that Joe Biden said. Right after he said, and Putin wins. Period. Done. Story's over. Why are we having this conversation? It's why we are watching as Joe Biden is about to throw all of America under a bus to make a deal that will threaten Israel, Europe, and the United States within the next 5 years, because it will give the capability of nuclear weapons and the money needed for those nuclear weapons and the terrorists needed for those nuclear weapons. That's the deal he's about to make. And he's going to tell you that he is a brilliant leader, that he is a great leader, that he made a deal no one else could make, that he's going to turn around what Trump did because he's a deal maker, and Iran is going to laugh all the way to the bank, all the way to their terrorist selves as they go around the world and attack American citizens, just like they did in 2016. Dow mentions that, here it is. Come on. Silly machine. Oh, no, sorry. Dow says, having lived abroad, I can vouch for the fact that America is seen very differently than we ever are aware living here all your life. That's for sure. It's not a joke to say that when an American goes overseas, everyone knows instantly you're an American. They look at your clothing, listen to the way you speak. More importantly, they look at the way you act. Because, how do I explain it? When you have lived your entire life in freedom and you have never known a moment without freedom, everyone else knows the difference because they've never had that. When you're not afraid of guns because you handle guns, you have a firearm license, maybe your uncle took you hunting, maybe you've gone trap shooting, maybe you just own one because you want to protect yourself, maybe you're a woman and you want to equalize and protect yourself from anyone. You know what? Most of the world can't do that. It's not that they don't want to do that. They can't do that. It's not allowed. If they have a firearm, in many parts of the world, you get killed for being able to hold a firearm. That a woman who is trying to protect herself, think about it, in Iran, where we're going to make this wonderful deal and people are going to tell us how great this is and how wonderful because they're being peaceful and they want to increase the net peace and stop nuclear war. And they stone women to death for being raped. And if a woman had a gun in her hands and she shot a man for trying to rape her, they would kill her because she had a gun. This is what the rest of the world is. So when you're an American and you're in another part of the world, yeah, people don't look, they see you, you stand out. When you say, oh, your government sucks, no one else in those other countries are going to say that. You can't even say that in Canada or in the United Kingdom. They have rules on what words you can use and what you can say. And if you don't say the right words, you can go to jail. You can be fined $50,000. You think I'm joking? Look it up. It's happened. It's real. Dow goes on to say, people outside watch the U.S. and have asked me time and again, how is it that your country, founded on the principles of power from the people, can't rein in our government? They think of us much in the same way that the Chinese Communist Party wants us to think about China. The people and governments are the same, and so the attitudes align. Well, everyone thinks that if you're American, you agree with America. Kind of like the same way that progressives think that if you're a Republican, you agree with everything Republican. And to be fair, Republicans say that about progressives as well. It's a generalization that we all tend to do. But it's just terrifying that, and every American should, and I think does know, it's a government of the people, that we have all the rights. The government only have the rights we give them. It's not a question. It's not an idea. It's not my suggestion. That is a fact. Documented, legal, it is a fact. But they don't want you to think. They just want you to obey. And if you're busy obeying, whether it's obeying LeBron or it's obeying some rapper or a Kardashian or some actor or a politician, you don't have time to do anything else. And you don't know anything else. Can't be free if you're always obeying. Dow mentions, often I would hear, isn't your government made up from the ordinary citizenry, just like you? I would respond to them, they are correct. However, if our representatives stay in power too long in power, the power corrupts. Absolutely. That's why I believe in term limits. Nobody should be in any elected office anywhere in the United States for more than 6 years. Period. Done. I don't care how good they are, how bad they are. I don't care. No one gets to be in any elected office for more than 6 years. Because once you're past that, the amount of corruption that exists goes higher. Year by year, every time. And I don't care what party you're in. I mean, is a Gandhi existing out there? I'm sure there might be one or two. And everyone else has some degree of corruption to them. In every party, everyone. It's the nature of the beast. It's destructive. All right, folks. So I've been at this 3 hours, 15 minutes. My voice is getting a little raw. I want to thank you all. I appreciate you. You're some of the best audiences that anyone can ask for, especially in political commentary. Especially when, I know you don't always get a chance to speak. That most people who do political commentary don't listen to your voice and they don't interact with you. I do. And I will always try to do that, no matter what. Always. Minus the bots, of course, but I will always try and speak with you. I'll always try and respond to you live, whether we have 12,000 people watching the show, whether we have 100,000 people watching the show, doesn't matter. I'm going to spend my time trying to talk with you because your voice matters. Your vote matters. You matter. And it's not because you're all black or you're all white or you're all Republican or you're all Democrat, because I don't believe in that. You're individuals. You're not just a Democrat. You're not just a Republican. You're not just black. You're not just a woman or trans or gay or straight or whatever it is you are. Life isn't that simple. Neither are you. And that's a good thing. That's why things are better. That's why things improve. And you need the respect. And I hope you can feel that from me to you. And how much I enjoy being able to speak with you guys, because I learn every time I come to this, every Sunday at 2:30 p.m., I learn from you guys from around the world, from our audience who's over in Sweden, in Germany, India, the United Kingdom, Peru, Canada, whether you're across the United States, our audience in Australia and in Arizona, some people in California, in Florida, New York State, of course, all over the place. Yeah, Sandy. And by the way, hello, Sandy. Thank you for watching the program. Yeah, they have the list of labels that are being put on people, or I like to call them check boxes, is enormous. And it's only getting bigger. And there's only going to be more of them. Then it never goes away. Because the more boxes you have, the less control, less freedom that you have, the more you're being controlled. Because you're only, you fit in this box, so you can only do this. You can't do something else. You don't have a choice. You don't have that freedom. It's not your right. Why? Because you're not in that box. It's not something that applies to you. Look at our movies. I know I don't do a lot of entertainment here, but I mean, look at the movies nowadays. You can't watch a movie. You can't appreciate Lord of the Rings unless there's a black person in it, unless there are women in the characters, not the characters that already exist. None of those characters. No. They have to introduce diversity. There has to be a Samoan in the Lord of the Rings, according to Amazon, so that you can enjoy Lord of the Rings. Because no one was able to enjoy it when Peter Jackson made the movies. Didn't make billions off of that. No one in the world could possibly have enjoyed Lord of the Rings, a book that was written, 75 years ago? No one could possibly identify with the story that goes on in the Lord of the Rings or in The Hobbit or The Silmarillion, which is why the books were made, which is why the cartoons were made, which is why The movies were made, which is why we have a fantasy genre and we have video games. Because no one could possibly connect to that unless it absolutely represents you. Because you have to have a gay and a trans and a black and a white and an Asian and an Indian and a Hindu and a Taoist, and they all have to be in there. The cast has to have everyone because there's a box, and some people have to be fat and some people have to be short and some of them have to be ugly. They all have to be in there, and they all have to be stars, and they all have to be major characters. And when you do that, there isn't even enough room for a story anymore. No. Let's get rid of the labels. Let's get term limits. Let's get rid of the labels, and let's hold our politicians accountable. Trudeau has to go. Biden has to be smacked down. He has to be told to, you know what? Biden, I've got one thing for the Biden-Harris administration. And I've said this to many politicians, including New York 19 Congressman Antonio Delgado, who I've been trying to speak to for 6 months. In every medium and format, I have contacted him over and over again, and he refuses to speak, will not answer me, will not address me, because he is afraid to answer even one question. And to these politicians, I have to say to them, you know what? You want to do a little thing. The least that you could possibly do, create an international policy for the Biden administration. Not even going to tell you to make one that's, that actually respects the Constitution or the rights of those other countries. Give the world an actual policy. Stand up in front of the world, which Biden has never done, not when he was on the campaign trail, not now. He has never said, here's my international policy, period, point blank. This is what we do. This is what America stands for and will promote in the world. He has never said that, not once. You want to help the world? Start there. Give us a policy. Give us a plan. Not a bunch of checklists. Not a bunch of obey, obey, obey. Just give us that. Let's start there. Because if you don't, and I know you won't, Antonio Delgado is going to be explaining to us if he makes it. Well, he'll make it through. He'll probably make it through, sadly. But Antonio Delgado, who doesn't care about speaking to you, and I'm sure there are many politicians that we can go and point at across the country, Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi, Ilhan Omar, Cori Bush. There's a lot of them. They're just going to keep doing what they do and keep oppressing till the day they get voted out. Sad. All right. Folks, I do love you guys. I love having your questions. I love speaking with you. I always lose track, but my voice is going a little bit. I want to thank you. And remember, every Sunday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can always call in 607-242-1582. You can always leave us a text, a chat, a tweet, even after the show, and we will always respond. We love you. We want you to be well. Be careful, especially for those in Northern Europe, over in Ukraine, Poland, Germany. Be careful, folks. Oh, Justin said just before I left. Hello, Justin. Justin says, I'm back, and did you answer my question about is Putin contact Cuba? And okay, 1 second. Justin, he said, I'm back. Did you answer my question, okay, about will Putin contact Cuba and Venezuela? I'm not quite sure I understand the question. So I'm going to stay on just to answer your question, Justin. because I do want to try and understand it, because I don't think I answered it. Will Putin contact Cuba and Venezuela? I think that's what you meant. Will Putin contact Cuba and Venezuela? I think he's always been in touch with them, but he doesn't have much influence on them. In particular, they've been cut off for the most part. The old Soviet Union used to have a vested interest in Cuba and other Soviet nations, and they would prop them up. They would help support their economies by constantly pumping money into those nations. That is a fact. And that's how they were able to maintain, basically stay flatline. The economy of Cuba never really improved from the 1950s, 1960s. Venezuela has gone downhill. So they don't change. When the Soviet Union fell apart, there's more distance between those other socialist nations and the old Soviet Union. They don't really talk as much and they don't have as much support. But they do have a preference to them as opposed to the United States and other countries. So do I think Putin would contact Cuba and Venezuela if a war breaks out? No. Because there's really nothing they can provide. Cuba has nothing that could help the Soviet Union, to help Russia or Putin. They have nothing. I mean, food, that's why he's taking over the Ukraine, so that he can have food. There's no military from Cuba. There's no military or political power from Cuba. There's no income from Cuba. There's nothing that Cuba can offer that helps him at all. Venezuela is pretty much in the same boat, although the one thing Venezuela does have is oil. But because the way they have destroyed their economy, the way that they have lost all of their experts, the way that they have tried to transition from oil to green energy, the way that their people are starving and their police and their government are shooting the public. This is a confirmed fact from the New York Times, 2018, as I recall. That's a fact. So, no, they offer nothing to him. They mean nothing to him. He wouldn't necessarily let them fall apart because, technically they could be a benefit in, say, like the UN, where he needs a couple extra votes. But in terms of any other support, what are they going to do? Nothing. He doesn't care about them. They don't advance any of his goals because they can't even advance their own goals. So do I think Putin contacts them? No. Because they give him nothing. I hope that makes sense. Again, you may not agree, and I'd love to see why people think they don't agree, but I just don't see it. Justin mentions Cuba got the bad end of the stick, it seems like. They're still stuck in 1950s. They didn't get the bad end of the stick. They got exactly what socialism promised them. Nothing. They got to be stagnant. And that's what socialism provides you. Stagnation. Communism provides stagnation. There is no reason and no impetus for anything. You're going to, whether you bust your butt and work 70 hours a week, or if you work 20, you get paid the same. You still get to have a house. You still get to have the same amount of food. You still get to have all the same services that everyone else gets. You don't get a benefit. Why would they move forward in time when there's absolutely no reason for them to do anything that would move them forward in time? That's communism. It's an aspect that you do not hear from people who have not lived in a socialist nation, nor have you heard that from the news media. And I think I said earlier, and I don't know if I finished the thought. Whenever you hear these people, especially professors in colleges, they're, oh, socialism's so great, it's wonderful, it's beautiful, it's going to work fantastic. Have you ever lived in a socialist nation? They will almost always, in my experience to this day, in doing speaking events at various colleges, and I'm always happy to do an event at colleges, I have never heard one teacher say yes. Not once. In 54 years of my life, since 1991, I have met one, absolutely, literally, one person from a Soviet or socialist nation that actually believes in socialism. One. That actually lived in socialism and says, no, it's great, and they're in America, and they want socialism. I've met one. I know thousands of people like that were from Soviet nations, socialist nations, and I've met one who thinks it's better that way than here. It's because it stagnates. That's why we have a better quality of life. Well, Justin mentions, what will Cuba and Venezuela do in the future? Fail. They're going to fail. They're failed countries. And there will be a revolt at some point. They will be taken over. There will be a public revolt. There are several that happen over the years. They just haven't been big enough to succeed, but they go through many revolts. Eventually one will succeed. They will be deposed and the nation will change. And or a neighboring nation will take them over. Because they fail. And the failure of socialism does not somehow miraculously keep you going. If it weren't for the support from China and from Russia, they would have failed decades ago. That's just a fact. So I hope I've answered the questions for you, Justin. I thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming back and asking more questions. I'm always happy to answer questions. I hope you found them to be informative and useful. Hopefully you considered subscribing. And maybe you'll let your friends know as well. I'm always happy to hear questions. And if anyone has any other questions, please leave them in the comments below. But again, until next Sunday. Now, throughout the week, we do a couple more videos, but every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you, and we're looking forward to the next one. Thank you, everyone.